Lena Moreau's hand trembled as she signed the divorce papers in secret, believing 3 years of captivity were finally ending. But Victor Calderon, the man who owned half the city's underworld, knew about her betrayal before the ink dried. What she thought was a cold business arrangement, he considered sacred and unbreakable. The moment she tried to walk away, invisible chains tightened around her throat. Freedom, she would soon discover, was never hers to claim. If you want to see how far desperation can push a woman, and how obsession can rewrite every rule, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The rain hammered against the penthouse windows like 1,000 angry fists, but Lena Moreau barely heard it. Her focus remained fixed on the stack of papers spread across the mahogany desk, divorce documents that had taken her 3 months to secretly prepare. Her lawyer, a nervous man named Patterson, who'd insisted on meeting in a courthouse bathroom rather than his office, had finally delivered them yesterday. Now they sat before her like a loaded gun, waiting for her courage to pull the trigger. She picked up the pen with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. 3 years. 3 years of living in a gilded cage with a man whose very name made hardened criminals look over their shoulders. 3 years of playing the perfect, silent wife to Victor Calderon, a man whose business empire was built on shadows, blood, and absolute control. 3 years of pretending she'd chosen this life instead of being cornered into it by her father's catastrophic debts and even worse decisions. The marriage contract had been presented to her on her 23rd birthday like a poisoned gift. Sign it, and her father's gambling debts, along with the death sentence that came with them, would disappear. Refuse, and her father would be found in pieces scattered across the docks. Her mother had been dead for 5 years by then. She had no siblings, just a father who loved cards more than his daughter and a stranger in an expensive suit offering the devil's bargain. She'd signed. Victor had been perfectly cordial during their brief engagement, polite, distant. He'd never touched her beyond what photographs required. Their wedding had been a spectacle for his business associates, a demonstration of power, connections, legitimacy. She'd worn white and smiled until her face ached while men whose hands were stained with violence clinked champagne glasses and offered hollow congratulations. The wedding night, she'd braced herself for demands that never came. Victor had simply nodded at her from across the master bedroom and said, "The guest room is prepared if you prefer privacy. This arrangement need not be uncomfortable." She'd fled to the guest room and locked the door, though she suspected the lock meant nothing in a home where Victor controlled everything. For 3 years, they'd lived like polite strangers. He conducted his business, she never asked details, but the late-night phone calls and men in dark suits told her enough. She attended charity galas on his arm, smiled for cameras, and played her role flawlessly. In exchange, she had unlimited credit cards she rarely used, a wardrobe full of designer clothes she didn't want, and a prison that looked like paradise. But she'd never stop planning her escape. Lena pressed the pen to paper and signed her name with deliberate strokes. The sound of ink scratching across expensive paper felt like breaking glass. Freedom, finally. She'd already secured a small apartment across the city under a friend's name. She had a bag packed and hidden in her closet. Her father, sober for 6 months now, living in a rehabilitation facility Victor's money had paid for, would be furious. But he'd survive. Victor might be many things, but he'd never shown interest in revenge against her father. The old man wasn't worth the effort. Tomorrow morning, while Victor was in his early meeting with his lieutenants, she'd have Patterson file the papers. By the time Victor found out, she'd be gone, vanished into the city's millions of anonymous faces. She'd waited, planned, and prepared for this moment with the patience of someone who'd learned that hasty moves led to broken bones. Lena tucked the signed documents into an envelope, sealed it, and slipped it into her purse. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd done it. The first real step toward freedom. Working late? The voice came from the doorway, smooth, controlled, and utterly terrifying in its calmness. Lena spun around so fast she nearly knocked over the desk lamp. Victor stood in the shadows just beyond the study's entrance, his tall frame backlit by the hallway's soft lighting. He wore the same impeccable charcoal suit he'd left in that morning, though his tie was loosened and his dark hair slightly disheveled. His face remained unreadable. It always was. Sharp features, dark eyes that missed nothing, and a mouth that rarely curved into genuine smiles. "I didn't hear you come in," Lena managed, hating how breathless she sounded. "I noticed." Victor stepped into the study, his movements precise and unhurried. His gaze swept across the desk, lingering for just a moment on her purse before returning to her face. "You seemed very focused." "Just correspondence." The lie tasted metallic. "At midnight?" "I couldn't sleep." Victor moved closer, and Lena forced herself not to step back. Showing fear was like showing blood to a shark. She'd learned that lesson watching how Victor's world operated. Weakness invited attack. "Strange," Victor said quietly. "I've never known you to use my private study for correspondence before." "I didn't think you'd mind. You've never objected to me being in here." "I don't." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "I'm simply curious about what correspondence requires such privacy." Lena's fingers tightened on the edge of the desk. "Personal letters. To a friend." "Which friend? Does it matter?" "It does to me." There was something different in his voice tonight, something harder beneath the usual controlled calm. Lena had become an expert at reading the micro-expressions of a man who revealed nothing, and right now every instinct screamed danger. "Sarah," Lena said, picking the name of her former college roommate. "We've been planning to meet for coffee. Sarah Montgomery, currently living in Boston, married last spring." Victor's eyes never left hers. "Odd that you'd need to write letters to someone you text with regularly." Ice flooded Lena's veins. He knew. He'd always known. Every text, every call, every coffee meeting with the few friends she'd managed to maintain, he'd known about all of it. "You monitor my phone," she said flatly. "I monitor everything. No apology, no shame. Simple fact. Your safety requires it." "My safety." Bitterness leaked into her words. "Is that what you call this? This surveillance?" "Yes." Victor's expression didn't change. "You are my wife. That makes you a target for every enemy I've ever made. Do you have any idea how many people would love to hurt me by hurting you?" "I'm not really your wife," Lena shot back. "I'm an obligation, a contract, a prop for your legitimate business facade." Something flickered across Victor's face, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. Pain? Anger? It vanished before she could identify it. "Is that what you believe?" His voice had dropped lower, quieter. Somehow that made it more threatening. "That you're merely a prop?" "What else would I be?" Victor was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Then he moved, so quickly she didn't have time to react. His hand shot out and grabbed her purse from the desk. "Victor, don't!" But he'd already opened it, already pulled out the sealed envelope. His long fingers broke the seal with casual efficiency, and Lena watched helplessly as he extracted the divorce papers she'd signed. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Victor read through the document slowly, methodically. His face remained perfectly blank, but Lena noticed his jaw tighten. A muscle jumped beneath his left eye. His knuckles went white where he gripped the papers. When he finally looked up, his eyes had gone cold. Not angry. Anger would have been better. This was something far worse, something arctic and absolute. "How long have you been planning this?" His voice was so controlled it didn't even sound human. Lena lifted her chin. "Does it matter?" "Answer the question." 3 months, since you left for Tokyo and I had time to think clearly." "Clearly." Victor set the papers down on the desk with terrible precision. "And what exactly did your clear thinking tell you?" "That I've paid my father's debt. 3 years, Victor. 3 years of playing your wife, attending your events, smiling for your cameras. I've fulfilled every term of our agreement." "Agreement." He repeated the word like it was a foreign language. "You think this was an agreement? What else would you call it?" "A business arrangement." "You needed a wife for appearances." "I needed my father to live." Transaction complete. Victor moved so fast Lena didn't have time to breathe. Suddenly, he was there, his hands planted on the desk on either side of her, caging her in. He didn't touch her, but his presence was overwhelming. heat and danger, and something wild barely restrained beneath expensive fabric. "You understand nothing," he said, his voice rough. "Nothing." Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Then explain it to me." "No." "No?" "Because you've already made up your mind. You've already signed these papers. You've already decided to walk away." His dark eyes burned into hers. "Tell me, Lena, where exactly were you planning to go?" She refused to answer. Victor's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "The apartment on 7th Street, Unit 412, the one your friend Rachel secured under her name 3 weeks ago?" Lena's stomach dropped. "I know about the bag in your closet," Victor continued, his voice deadly soft. "The burner phone you bought in cash. The small bank account you've been building from the allowance I provide. I know about Patterson, who wet himself when my associate paid him a visit this afternoon. I know about every step of your escape plan, Lena. I've known from the beginning." "Then why didn't you stop me?" The words came out barely above a whisper. "Because I wanted to see if you'd really do it." Something raw flashed across his face. "I wanted to see if you'd really try to leave." "And now that I have?" Victor leaned closer, and Lena's breath caught. This close, she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the rapid pulse at his throat that betrayed the control he wore like armor. "Now," Victor said, each word deliberate, "we're going to discuss the reality of your situation." "I know my situation. I'm trapped in a marriage I never wanted. You're alive." Victor cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "You're alive because I put my protection around you. You're alive because my name keeps predators at bay. You're alive because anyone who even thinks about hurting you knows they'll answer to me. I never asked for your protection." "You think that matters?" Victor pushed off the desk suddenly, stalking toward the window. Rain still lashed against the glass, turning the city lights below into scattered diamonds. "You think the monsters out there care what you asked for?" He turned back to face her, and for the first time since she'd known him, Victor Calderone looked almost fragile. No, not fragile. Fractured. 3 years ago, your father made deals with people who eat innocents for breakfast, Victor said. Dmitry Kozlov. Have you heard that name? Lena shook her head. Good. It means you've been sufficiently protected. Victor's hands clenched at his sides. Dmitry runs the trafficking rings on the east side. Drugs, weapons, humans. He trades in all of it. Your father owed him $700,000. When your father couldn't pay, Dmitry made him an offer. He'd forgive the debt in exchange for you. The words hit Lena like physical blows. What? Your father was going to sell you to Dmitry Kozlov to clear his gambling debts, Victor said, each word measured and brutal. Dmitry planned to put you in one of his clubs. You would have lasted maybe 6 months before you were used up and discarded. Or dead. Lena grabbed the desk to keep from collapsing. You're lying. I have recordings if you'd like to hear them. Your father begging Dmitry for more time. Dmitry describing exactly what he'd do to you once the transaction was complete. No. Lena shook her head violently. My father wouldn't. Your father is a coward and a drunk who'd sell his soul for a winning hand, Victor said flatly. I intercepted the deal. I paid off your father's debts to Dmitry and every other bloodsucker circling him. I offered you a marriage contract instead of slavery. You never told me because I knew you'd blame yourself for your father's choices. Victor's expression softened slightly. You were 23, Lena. Brilliant. Beautiful. You just graduated with honors. You had your whole life ahead of you. I wasn't going to let your father's failures destroy that. Lena's mind reeled. 3 years. 3 years of thinking she'd been forced into a cold business arrangement when in reality... Why? She whispered. Why would you do that for a stranger? Victor was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible over the rain. You weren't a stranger. We'd never met before the contract signing. No. Victor's jaw tightened. But I'd seen you. 6 months before your father's debts came due, I saw you at a gallery opening. You were there with friends, laughing at some sculpture you said looked like a confused octopus. You were wearing a blue dress and your hair was shorter then. You talked with your hands. You smiled like you meant it. Lena stared at him, struggling to process what she was hearing. I couldn't stop watching you, Victor continued, his voice rough. You were so alive, so different from the darkness I live in. When your father's situation landed on my desk 6 months later, I recognized your name immediately. I could have let it play out, could have let Dmitri take you, could have done nothing. But you didn't. No. Victor met her eyes. I structured the marriage contract to protect you, to give you everything you'd need, to keep you safe without making demands you weren't ready to meet. I told myself it was business, that you'd provide the legitimate facade I needed while I provided you security. I told myself I could maintain distance. Be professional. What changed? Nothing changed, Victor said, and suddenly he was moving toward her again. That's the problem, Lena. From the moment you walked into that wedding in white, looking at me like I was your executioner instead of your husband, I've been trying to maintain distance, trying to give you space, trying to convince myself that keeping you safe was enough. He stopped in front of her, close enough to touch, but still not touching. But watching you plan this escape, Victor continued, his voice low and intense, watching you count down the days until you could leave me, it made me realize something. I don't want distance. I don't want professionalism. I don't want a contract. What do you want? Lena's voice came out barely above a whisper. You? The word was simple, absolute. I want you, Lena, not as an obligation, not as protection, not as business. I want you to stay because you choose to, because you want to be here, with me. Lena's breath caught in her throat. 3 years of carefully maintained distance, and now this? Now he decided to shatter every boundary between them? You can't just, she started. I know. Victor's hand lifted, hesitated, then gently cupped her face. His palm was warm against her skin. I know I have no right to ask. I know I've kept you in a cage, even if that cage was meant to protect you. I know you have every reason to walk away. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. But I'm asking anyway, Victor said softly. Stay. Not because of a contract, not because of your father, not because of fear. Stay because you want to know what this could be, what we could be. Lena's mind screamed at her to pull away, to grab her bag and run, to escape while she still could. But her heart, traitorous and foolish, hammered against her ribs for entirely different reasons. When had Victor gotten so close? When had his touch started to feel like warmth instead of chains? I don't even know you, she whispered. Then let me show you who I am. Victor's other hand came up to frame her face, cradling it like something precious. Give me a chance, Lena. Give us a chance. If after that you still want to leave, I won't stop you. You promise? I promise. His eyes held hers, and for the first time in 3 years she saw past the armor to the man beneath, scarred, dangerous, but sincere. But if you choose to stay, if you choose me, then I need you to understand something. What? This won't be a contract anymore, Victor said, his voice dropping to something dark and possessive. This will be real, messy, complicated. I'm not an easy man, Lena. I'm jealous and controlling, and I've built my life on violence. But I swear to you, I will never hurt you, never betray you, and I will burn this entire city down before I let anyone take you from me. Before Lena could respond, before she could even process what he was saying, the penthouse's security alarm shrieked to life. Victor's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The vulnerable man vanished, replaced by the cold, lethal power broker whose name struck fear into hardened criminals. He pulled a gun from the holster at his back so fast Lena barely saw the movement. Stay behind me, he ordered, all softness gone from his voice. What's happening? Someone just breached our security. Victor moved toward the study door, his body positioned between Lena and any threat. Someone very stupid or very desperate. Gunshots erupted from somewhere in the penthouse, sharp cracks that made Lena flinch. Victor didn't even blink. He grabbed his phone with his free hand and spoke rapidly into it. Code red. Penthouse breach. I need full response team immediately. More gunshots. Closer now. The sound of breaking glass. Shouts in a language Lena didn't recognize. Victor, what's going on? Remember what I said about you being a target? Victor's voice was eerily calm. This is what I meant. The study door exploded inward. 3 men in black tactical gear stormed through, weapons raised. Victor didn't hesitate. He fired 3 times in rapid succession. 2 men dropped. The third took cover behind the door frame. "Behind the desk!" Victor barked at Lena. "Now!" She dove behind the heavy mahogany furniture just as automatic gunfire tore through the study. Wood splintered, glass shattered. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and violence. Lena pressed herself against the desk's back panel, hands over her ears, trying to make herself as small as possible. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. Another explosion. This one from a flashbang grenade that turned the world white and made her ears ring. Through the chaos, she heard Victor moving with lethal efficiency. More gunshots, a man screaming, heavy bodies hitting the floor, then silence. Brief and terrible. "Lena," Victor's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. "Are you hurt?" She looked up to find him kneeling beside the desk, his suit jacket torn and blood splattered across his white shirt. His dark eyes scanned her frantically for injuries. "I'm fine," she managed. "Is that your blood?" "No." Victor helped her to her feet, his hands surprisingly gentle despite the violence he'd just committed. "We need to move. Now. More will be coming." "Who are they?" "Dmitry Kozlov's men." Victor's expression was grim. "He must have learned about your divorce filing. He thinks if you're not under my protection anymore, you're fair game." Lena's stomach turned to ice. "How would he know about the filing? Patterson said he'd keep it confidential." "Patterson is dead," Victor said bluntly. "They probably tortured the information out of him before killing him." The casual way he said it, like announcing the weather, made Lena realize how different Victor's world truly was. This wasn't a movie. This wasn't a story. This was real violence, real death, and she'd almost walked straight into it by leaving his protection. Footsteps thundered through the penthouse, multiple sets, moving fast. "Time's up." Victor grabbed Lena's hand and pulled her toward a section of wall that looked completely ordinary. He pressed something, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage. "Move!" They plunged into darkness, the panel sliding shut behind them. Lena heard muffled shouts and more gunfire from the study they'd just left. Victor pulled her forward through the passage, one hand gripping hers while the other held his weapon ready. "Where does this go?" Lena whispered. "Private elevator. It'll take us to the garage." Victor's voice was steady, despite the chaos pursuing them. "I have a car waiting." They emerged into a small, stark room with a single elevator door. Victor hit the call button and positioned himself between Lena and the passage entrance. The sounds of pursuit grew louder. "They're going to find us," Lena said. "Probably." Victor checked his weapon. "How many rounds do you think I have left?" "I don't know." 4. He smiled without humor. "I'm going to need to make them count." The elevator dinged, impossibly loud in the small space. The doors slid open just as armed men burst through the passage. Victor shoved Lena into the elevator and spun, firing with mechanical precision. 2 men dropped. His gun clicked empty. Victor threw himself into the elevator as bullets sparked off the closing doors. They descended in ringing silence, broken only by their harsh breathing. "I need you to listen very carefully," Victor said, his hand still gripping hers. "When we reach the garage, we're going to run to a black SUV. Don't stop, don't look back, and stay close to me." "Okay." "There will probably be more of them waiting. When I tell you to get down, you get down. Understand?" Lena nodded, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. The elevator doors opened to reveal the parking garage, an absolute chaos. Men in tactical gear swarmed around Victor's vehicles, but they weren't alone. Other men, Victor's men, Lena realized, engaged them in brutal combat. Gunfire echoed off concrete walls, blood pooled on oil-stained floors. "Down!" Victor pulled Lena low as bullets whined overhead. They ran in a crouch toward the promised SUV, Victor's body shielding hers the entire way. Someone lunged from between cars. Victor kicked them in the knee with bone-breaking force and kept moving. They reached the SUV. Victor yanked the door open and practically threw Lena into the back seat before diving in after her. The driver, a massive man with a scarred face, stomped the accelerator before Victor even closed the door. The SUV smashed through the garage's security gate like it was tissue paper. Tires screamed as they fishtailed onto the street. Behind them, more vehicles gave chase. "How bad is it, Marcus?" Victor asked the driver calmly, as if this was a normal Tuesday evening. "7 teams total, boss. They hit all your properties simultaneously." Marcus wove through traffic with terrifying skill. "Dimitri's throwing everything at this? He wants the girl bad. He's not getting her." Something slammed into the SUV's rear, another vehicle ramming them. Lena was thrown forward, only Victor's arm across her chest keeping her from hitting the front seats. "Seatbelt," Victor ordered, helping her fasten it. "This is going to get rough." Rough was an understatement. The next 10 minutes were a blur of squealing tires, shattering glass, and Marcus performing maneuvers that should have been impossible in a vehicle this large. Victor made 3 phone calls during the chase, coordinating his response with the same clinical efficiency he might use to plan a business meeting. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus pulled into an underground garage beneath a building Lena didn't recognize. Security barriers dropped behind them like steel teeth. "Safe house," Victor explained, helping Lena out of the SUV on shaking legs. "Dimitri doesn't know about this location. We'll stay here until I can resolve this situation." "Resolve it?" Lena stared at him. "Victor, they tried to kill us." "Yes." His expression was grim, "which means Dimitri has declared war, and he's about to learn why that was a mistake." He guided her into an elevator that descended even further underground. When the doors opened, Lena found herself in what could only be described as a bunker: concrete walls, reinforced doors, and enough weapons and supplies to withstand a siege. "There's a bedroom through that door," Victor said, pointing. "You should rest. You're safe here." "Safe?" Lena's voice cracked. "Victor, my entire world just exploded." "I know." He cupped her face again with both hands, and despite everything, the violence, the fear, the chaos, his touch remained gentle. "I know, and I'm sorry. This is exactly what I was trying to protect you from. By keeping me in a cage? By keeping you alive." Victor's thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Do you understand now, Lena? This is why I monitor everything. Why I control your movements. Why I can't just let you walk away. The moment you're not under my protection, people like Dimitri will come for you. They'll hurt you to hurt me." Lena's legs finally gave out. She sank onto a nearby chair, trembling. "What do I do?" Victor knelt in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. "You make a choice. Tonight proved what I've been trying to tell you. You can't have freedom and safety, not in my world. If you want to be free of me, truly free, you'll need to disappear completely. New identity, new life, new everything. I can arrange it. I can make you vanish so thoroughly even I won't be able to find you. Or you stay. You accept the protection I'm offering. You let me keep you safe." His dark eyes searched hers. "But if you stay this time, Lena, it can't be like before. I can't maintain distance anymore. Not after tonight. Not after almost losing you." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want a real marriage." Victor's voice was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard. "I want you in my bed, in my life, in my world, truly in it, not just hovering at the edges. I want to come home to you. I want to wake up next to you. I want everyone in this city to know you're not just my wife in name." "Victor, I know it's not fair to ask this after everything that just happened," he continued. "I know you're scared and confused, and you have every right to run as far from me as possible. But I'm asking anyway. Stay with me. Choose me. Choose us." Lena looked at this dangerous man kneeling before her. This man who'd just killed multiple people without hesitation, who controlled criminal empires, who lived in a world of blood and shadows. But he was also the man who'd saved her from a fate worse than death, who'd given her 3 years of safety when he could have demanded so much more, who looked at her like she was the only light in his darkness. "If I stay," she said slowly, "things change. I'm not your possession, Victor. I'm not your trophy wife or your business asset. If I'm going to be your partner, really your partner, then I need to know everything. The truth about your business. The truth about who you are. No more secrets, no more protected innocence. Victor's expression flickered with something that might have been fear. My world is ugly, Lena. Once you see it clearly, you might not be able to look at me the same way. Then that's a risk you'll have to take, Lena lifted her chin, because I won't be kept in the dark anymore. Either you trust me with the truth, or I disappear and you never see me again. For a long moment, Victor simply looked at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. All right, he said. You want the truth? I'll give you the truth. All of it. Even the parts that will make you hate me. I don't hate you, Lena said quietly. You might, when you learn everything I've done, everything I'm willing to do to keep you. Try me. Victor stood, pulling her up with him. His hands cradled her face with heartbreaking gentleness. You're sure about this? Once you know, you can't unknow it. Once you're truly in my world, there's no going back to innocent. I haven't been innocent since my father sold me to clear his debts, Lena said. I just didn't know it until tonight. Something fierce and possessive flashed in Victor's eyes. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. If you stay, you're mine. Completely. I won't share you. I won't hide you. I won't pretend you're just a convenient arrangement. Everyone will know you belong to me. And what do I get in return? Everything. His voice dropped to a rough whisper. My protection. My loyalty. My truth. My world. Everything I am and everything I have. It's yours, Lena. It's always been yours. Her breath caught. 3 years of distance, of carefully maintained boundaries, and now this raw honesty that felt more dangerous than the bullets that had torn through their home. I need time, Lena whispered. Time to process everything. Time to understand what I'm choosing. You have until tomorrow night, Victor said. After that, I go to war with Dmitri. And once that starts, there won't be any safe middle ground. You'll need to be all in with me, or gone completely. That's not much time. It's all the time I have to give. Victor's thumb traced her lower lip, and heat flickered in his dark eyes. Get some rest, Lena. Tomorrow I'll show you exactly who Victor Calderon is, and then you can decide if you can live with that man. He stepped back, and Lena immediately felt the loss of his warmth. Victor moved toward the bunker's security monitors, his phone already to his ear as he began coordinating his response to Dmitri's attack. Lena watched him work. This man who was offering her everything and demanding the same in return. This man who'd kept her safe while keeping her at arm's length. This man who'd just admitted he'd been obsessed with her from the moment he saw her laugh at a sculpture in a gallery. She touched her lips where his thumb had traced and felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. Tomorrow, she'd learn the truth about Victor's world. Tomorrow, she'd make a choice that would define the rest of her life. But tonight, as she lay in the bunker's bedroom listening to Victor's voice commanding his empire, Lena acknowledged something she'd been denying for months. She didn't hate this marriage, and that terrified her more than any assassin ever could. The bunker's fluorescent lights flickered at 6 in the morning, pulling Lena from a fitful sleep she hadn't expected to find. Her dreams had been a chaotic blend of gunfire, Victor's dark eyes, and the sickening realization that her father had been willing to trade her like livestock. She sat up in the narrow bed, disoriented by the concrete walls and the absence of windows. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The divorce papers, Victor's confession, Dmitri's attack, the choice she had to make by tonight. She found Victor in the main room of the bunker, standing before a wall of monitors that displayed various locations throughout the city. He'd changed into black tactical pants and a dark sweater that emphasized his lean, dangerous frame. He hadn't slept. She could tell by the tension in his shoulders and the coffee cup that looked like it had been refilled a dozen times. "You're awake," he said without turning around. "There's coffee. Food in the kitchen net." Lena moved closer, studying the monitors. She recognized some of the locations, their penthouse, now swarming with Victor's security team, other buildings she didn't know. "What am I looking at?" "My empire." Victor's voice was flat, factual. "You wanted truth. This is where it starts." He gestured to different screens as he spoke, his tone clinical. like a professor delivering a lecture on something morally neutral rather than his own criminal organization. I own 17 legitimate businesses in this city: hotels, restaurants, construction companies, shipping firms. They generate approximately $200 million annually in legal revenue. He tapped one screen. I also control the port's import operations through carefully placed officials. 30% of everything that comes through those docks pays me a fee. Protection money, Lena said quietly. Yes. Protection from other organizations who would cause problems. Protection from customs inspectors who might look too closely. Protection from labor disputes that could shut down operations. Victor's expression didn't change. I employ 800 people directly, another 3,000 indirectly. Most of them have no idea who actually signs their paychecks. He moved to another set of monitors showing nightclubs, their interiors pulsing with lights, even in the replay footage. I own 6 clubs. They're legitimate on paper: proper licenses, health inspections, tax payments. They're also where I launder money from less legitimate ventures. Victor's jaw tightened slightly. Before you ask, no trafficking, no drugs, no forced prostitution. Those lines I don't cross. But gambling happens in back rooms, information gets traded, deals get made. My clubs are neutral ground where different organizations can meet without bloodshed. That's why they're profitable, Lena said, understanding dawning. They're not just clubs, they're Switzerland. Exactly. Something that might have been approval flickered in Victor's eyes. You're quick. He pulled up different footage: warehouses, shipping containers, men moving boxes under cover of darkness. This is where things get darker, Victor said. I run weapons. Not to terrorists or extremists, I have standards, but to private military contractors, to foreign governments, to organizations that need firepower and can't acquire it through official channels. It's lucrative and extremely dangerous. One shipment goes wrong, and federal agencies get involved. Lena's stomach tightened. Have shipments gone wrong? Twice in 8 years. Both times I had enough political insulation to avoid prosecution. I paid substantial fines through shell corporations and improved my security protocols. Victor's voice remained steady. 3 men died during the second incident. They worked for me. Their families received $5 million each and new identities if they wanted them. That doesn't bring them back. No, it doesn't. For the first time, emotion crept into Victor's voice. I think about them every day. Marcus was there. He still has nightmares. But this is the business I'm in, Lena. People die. Sometimes they're enemies. Sometimes they're friends. Sometimes they're innocents who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. He turned to face her fully, and his eyes were dark with something that looked like shame. I've killed 37 people, Victor said flatly. 17 in self-defense or defense of my people. 20 because they betrayed me or threatened my operations. I remember every face, every name. I'm not asking you to forgive those deaths. I'm just asking you to understand that this is who I am, a man who has built something powerful on a foundation of blood. Lena's hands trembled slightly. She clasped them together. What about Dmitri? Last night you said he wanted to buy me from my father. Victor's expression hardened into something terrifying. Dmitri Kozlov runs the worst kind of operation: human trafficking, forced labor. He supplies women and children to the worst predators this city has to offer. I've spent the last 5 years trying to destroy his organization, but he's protected by people in very high places. Why do you care? If it's just business. Because some things aren't business. Victor's control cracked, and sudden fury blazed in his eyes. Because I had a sister once, Katerina. She was 16 when Dmitri's people took her. By the time I found her 3 months later, she'd been so thoroughly broken that she didn't even recognize me. The pain in his voice was raw enough to make Lena's chest ache. She killed herself 2 years later, Victor continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Jumped from our parents' apartment building. I was 24 years old, and I couldn't save her. Couldn't put her back together. Couldn't make her forget what they'd done. Victor, I'm so... Don't. He held up a hand. Don't pity me. I'm telling you this so you understand why I went to such lengths to keep you away from Dmitri. Why I structured our marriage contract the way I did. When I saw your name connected to a debt Dmitri held, I saw Katerina. I saw another innocent being fed to monsters. And I wouldn't let that happen again. Lena's throat tightened with unshed tears. You saved me. I kept you safe. There's a difference. Victor turned back to the monitors. But safety came with a price. You've been isolated, controlled, trapped in a life you didn't choose. Everything I did to protect you also imprisoned you. You gave me 3 years, Lena said softly. 3 years to heal from my father's betrayal. 3 years to finish my education remotely. 3 years of stability. You could have demanded so much more. I wanted to. Victor's admission was rough. Every night I wanted to go to you. Every morning I wanted to wake up beside you. Every event where you wore those beautiful dresses and smiled for cameras, I wanted to tell everyone there that you were mine. Not a contract, not an arrangement, mine. Why didn't you? Because you looked at me like I was your jailer. He glanced at her over his shoulder. How could I demand affection from someone who saw me as their captor? How could I touch you when you flinched every time I came close? I never flinched, Lena protested. You did. Small movements you probably didn't even realize. But I noticed. I always noticed. Victor's voice carried years of restrained longing. So I kept my distance, gave you space, told myself that keeping you safe was enough, that watching you slowly come back to life after your father's betrayal was its own reward. He pulled up new footage on the screens, this time showing Lena herself over the past 3 years. Her attending gallery openings, having coffee with friends, walking through parks, shopping, living. I watched you heal, Victor said quietly. Watched you remember how to laugh. Watched you make friends again. Watched you become yourself again. And I told myself I was content with that I didn't need more. But you did need more. Yes. He turned to face her fully. I needed you to look at me the way you look at art that moves you. I needed you to smile at me the way you smile at your friends. I needed you to choose me, not because of a contract or protection or fear, but because you wanted me. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. This vulnerable honesty was almost harder to witness than the violence from last night. Victor Calderón, the man who commanded criminal empires and killed without hesitation, was standing before her admitting to 3 years of loneliness and longing. Show me more, she said. You promised me everything. Victor studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Bring him up, he said simply, then ended the call. 5 minutes later, the bunker's elevator opened. Marcus emerged, dragging a man whose face was bruised and bloodied. The prisoner's hands were zip-tied behind his back, and he stumbled as Marcus forced him to his knees in the center of the room. Lena recognized him, one of the men from last night's attack. This is Alexei Volkov, Victor said, his voice returning to that clinical coldness. He's one of Dmitri's lieutenants. Marcus captured him during the assault on our penthouse. Alexei spat blood on the concrete floor. You're dead, Calderón. Dmitri will gut you for this. Dmitri is welcome to try. Victor moved closer to the kneeling man. But first, you're going to tell me everything about last night's attack. Who ordered it, how many teams, what the target parameters were. Go to hell. Victor's expression didn't change. He simply looked at Marcus and nodded. The larger man produced a knife from his belt, a wicked thing with a serrated edge. Wait, Lena said, her voice sharp. What are you doing? Getting information, Victor said calmly. You wanted to see my world, Lena. This is part of it. You're going to torture him? Yes. No hesitation, no apology. He has information I need, information that will keep you safe and help me destroy Dmitri's operation. I will do whatever is necessary to extract that information. Lena's stomach churned. This was different from the violence of last night. That had been survival, self-defense. This was calculated, deliberate, cold. I can't watch this, she whispered. Then go to the bedroom, Victor said. But understand something, Lena. This is what I am. This is what I do. I torture enemies for information. I kill people who threaten my operations. I make decisions that would horrify most people. If you're going to choose to stay with me, you need to accept all of it. Alexei laughed, a wet, pained sound. She's weak. Look at her. She'll run the moment you start cutting. Victor's hand shot out faster than Lena could track, grabbing Alexei by the throat. You don't speak about her. You don't look at her. You don't acknowledge her existence. Or what? You'll kill me? Alexei's smile was bloody. You'll kill me anyway. Eventually, Victor agreed, but I can make it quick, or I can make it last days. Your choice depends entirely on how cooperative you are. He released Alexei and stepped back, gesturing for Marcus to begin. The larger man grabbed Alexei's hand and positioned the knife at his smallest finger. Last chance, Victor said. Tell me what I want to know. Fuck you, Calderon! Marcus began to cut. Alexei screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed off the concrete walls. Lena turned away, her hands pressed over her ears, bile rising in her throat. This was Victor's world, this darkness, this brutality. Stop! The word tore from her throat before she could stop it. The screaming cut off. Lena turned back to find Victor watching her, his expression unreadable. Marcus had paused, the knife still pressed against Alexei's hand. I need to know what's so, Lena said, her voice shaking. I need to understand why. Not just that you do this. I need to understand your reasoning. Victor gestured for Marcus to step back. He moved closer to Lena, careful to keep his blood-stained hands away from her. Dmitri attacked our home last night, Victor said. He killed 3 of my guards. He tried to kill you. This man was part of that attack. He has information about Dmitri's operations, his safe houses, his next moves. Every second I don't have that information is a second you're in danger. So you torture it out of him. Yes, because I've tried other methods. I've tried bribes. Dmitri's men are too afraid of him to take money. I've tried reasoning. They're fanatics who believe Dmitri is untouchable. I've tried patience. It gets people killed. This works. It's brutal and ugly and morally reprehensible. But it works. Lena looked at Alexei, who glared back at her with pure hatred in his eyes. She thought about the men who'd stormed their home, the bullets that had torn through their study, the fear that had frozen her blood when she'd realized they wanted her dead, or worse. If he gives you the information, Lena heard herself say, what happens to him? I kill him quickly, painlessly. Victor's voice was matter-of-fact. If he doesn't, Marcus continues until he breaks or dies. Those are his only options? Yes. He attacked my home, tried to kill my wife. There's no scenario where he walks away from this. Lena's mind raced. This was the reality of Victor's world. Binary choices, brutal efficiency, survival purchased with violence. Do what you have to do, she finally said. But I can't watch. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Relief? Disappointment? She couldn't tell. Go, he said gently. I'll come find you when it's done. Lena fled to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. But the walls were thin, and she could hear everything. The questions Victor asked in that calm, terrible voice. The screams. The wet sounds of knife on flesh. The eventual sobbing confession as Alexei broke and told Victor everything. Then silence. A single gunshot. Finality. Lena sat on the bed, shaking, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness or fear, tears of understanding. This was Victor's world. This was the price of his protection. This was the darkness he lived in so that she could remain in the light. 20 minutes later, Victor entered the bedroom. He'd cleaned up, no blood visible on his hands or clothes, but his eyes carried the weight of what he'd done. It's over, he said quietly. He told me everything I needed to know. And then you killed him. Yes. Quickly. He didn't suffer at the end. That's supposed to make it better? No. Victor sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance between them. Nothing makes it better, but it makes it over. Lena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. How do you live with it? The killing? The torture? How do you close your eyes at night? With difficulty, Victor admitted. I don't sleep well. Haven't for years. I see their faces sometimes, hear their screams, wonder if there was another way. But then I remember why I did it. Remember who I was protecting. Remember that in my world, mercy is often just another word for weakness that gets exploited. I don't know if I can accept this, Lena whispered. the violence, the moral compromises, the blood on your hands. I know. Victor's voice was heavy with resignation. That's why I'm giving you the choice. You can leave, Lena. I meant what I said. I'll create a new identity for you, set you up somewhere safe. You'll never have to see this darkness again. And you? I'll destroy Dmitri, make sure you're never threatened again. Then I'll let you go. His jaw tightened. It will destroy me. But I'll do it. Because I love you more than I need you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. You love me, Lena repeated softly. Yes. Victor met her eyes. I've loved you since I saw you laugh in that gallery. I've loved you through 3 years of distance and restraint. I've loved you through every moment you've looked at me like a stranger. And I'll love you even as I watch you walk away. Lena's heart cracked open. She'd been so focused on her own captivity, her own suffering, that she'd never considered his. Victor Calderón, dangerous, powerful, feared, had been just as trapped as she was, trapped by his own protection, trapped by his fear of losing her, trapped by a love he couldn't express without risking her fragile recovery. I need air, she said. I need to think. There's a courtyard, small but private. I'll take you. Victor led her through the bunker to a small elevator that rose to what appeared to be a private garden, completely enclosed by high walls and hidden from the city around it. Dawn light filtered through morning clouds, soft and gray. The garden was beautiful in a stark way. Stone paths, carefully pruned trees, a small fountain. I come here sometimes, Victor said. When the darkness gets too heavy. Lena walked to the fountain, trailing her fingers through the cold water. Behind her, she heard Victor's phone ring, his voice discussing logistics with someone named Chen about Dmitri's locations. Always working, always planning, always 3 steps ahead of his enemies. She thought about the past 3 years, the safety, the education Victor had quietly funded, the therapy sessions with Dr. Reeves that Victor had arranged and never mentioned, the way he'd slowly, carefully, helped her rebuild a life her father had shattered. She thought about last night. The way Victor had positioned himself between her and danger without hesitation. The way he'd killed to protect her. The way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing in his world that mattered. She thought about this morning, the torture, the execution, the brutal efficiency of a man who would do absolutely anything to keep her safe. Could she love a man like this? Could she accept the darkness that came with his protection? Could she step fully into his world and maintain her own soul? Lena. Victor's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He stood a few feet away, phone lowered. Chen found 3 of Dmitri's safe houses. I need to move on this information before he relocates. You're leaving? I have to, but Marcus will stay with you. You'll be safe here. No. The word came out stronger than Lena expected. I'm going with you. Victor's expression shifted to immediate refusal. Absolutely not. This will be violent. I know. I'm going anyway. Lena moved toward him, and for the first time in 3 years, she was the one closing the distance between them. You want me to choose your world? Then let me see all of it. Not just the torture chamber, not just the aftermath. Let me see you in action. Lena, people will die today. Good people and bad people. You don't need to witness that. Maybe I do. She stopped inches from him, close enough to feel his heat, to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Maybe I need to see exactly what you're willing to do for me. Maybe I need to understand this darkness before I can decide if I can live with it. You could get hurt. You won't let that happen. It wasn't a question. Victor stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and cupped her face with both hands, that gesture that was becoming familiar, comforting even. If you come with me, he said carefully, you stay in the vehicle. You do exactly what I tell you. And if things go wrong, you run. You don't wait for me. You don't try to help. You run and you disappear and you live. Agreed? Agreed. I mean it, Lena. If it comes down to your life or mine, you choose yours. Promise me. I promise. She covered his hands with hers. Now show me who Victor Calderón really is. 20 minutes later, they were in the back of an armored SUV with Marcus driving and 3 other vehicles following. Victor had changed into tactical gear and armed himself with enough weapons to fight a small war. He'd insisted Lena wear a bulletproof vest under her jacket. First location is a warehouse in the industrial district, Victor explained, studying a tablet that showed satellite imagery. Chen's informant says Dmitri keeps about a dozen men there, along with some of his financial records. We hit fast, extract what we need, and move on before reinforcements arrive. What about the men? Lena asked. They'll have a choice: surrender or fight. Victor's voice was cold. Most will fight. Dmitri inspires more fear than loyalty, but his people know what happens to cowards. They arrived at the warehouse just as full daylight broke across the city. Victor's team moved with military precision, 6 vehicles boxing in the building's exits, men deploying with practiced efficiency. Victor stepped out, and Lena watched through the SUV's bulletproof windows as he transformed into something else entirely. This wasn't the man who'd held her gently in the study. This wasn't the vulnerable person who'd admitted to years of loneliness. This was the apex predator, the underworld king, the man whose name made criminals check their shadows. Victor gave hand signals. His team breached the warehouse doors simultaneously from 3 points. Gunfire erupted immediately, sharp cracks that made Lena flinch despite the vehicle's armor. Through the windows, she saw muzzle flashes and shadows moving with violent purpose. Victor moved through the chaos like death itself, smooth, precise, unstoppable. He fired twice, and 2 men dropped. Someone tried to flank him. Victor spun and put them down without breaking stride. A third attacker came from above. Victor rolled, came up firing, and the body tumbled from a catwalk. It was brutal, efficient, terrifying. But Lena couldn't look away. She watched Victor fight with a combination of skill and ruthlessness that should have horrified her. Instead, she found herself analyzing his movements, understanding the strategy behind each action. He wasn't killing for pleasure. He was eliminating threats to achieve an objective. Cold, clinical, necessary. The gunfire stopped after maybe 90 seconds. Victor's voice crackled over the radio. Warehouse secure. 4 hostiles down, 3 surrendered. Chen, get the records. Marcus, status on the wife? Safe and secure, boss, Marcus replied from the driver's seat. Lena watched as Victor's team worked through the warehouse, emerging with boxes of documents and hard drives. The 3 surrendered men were zip-tied and loaded into a separate vehicle. The 4 dead were left where they fell. Victor returned to the SUV, and when he slid in beside Lena, she saw blood splattered across his tactical vest. Not his. She'd learned to tell the difference. You okay? He asked, his eyes scanning her for signs of trauma. Yes. She surprised herself with the truth of it. Where's the next location? Victor studied her carefully. You're sure you want to continue? I told you, I need to see all of it. The second location was an apartment building that housed some of Dmitri's mid-level operators. This assault was quieter. Victor's team went in with suppressed weapons and moved floor by floor. Bomb seat. Lena watched on Victor's tablet as helmet cameras showed the systematic clearing of each unit. Some of Dmitri's people surrendered. Others fought and died. Victor showed no mercy to those who chose violence, but he offered quarter to those who yielded. It was a pattern Lena began to recognize. Victor's code. Brutal to enemies, but fair to those who submitted. The third location yielded the prize they'd been seeking: financial records showing Dmitri's network of shell companies and offshore accounts. More importantly, they found evidence of his political connections. Names of officials on his payroll, judges who'd buried evidence, prosecutors who'd sabotaged cases. This is what I needed, Victor said, reviewing the documents in the vehicle. This is how I destroy him. Not with bullets, with exposure. I leak this to the right journalists, the right federal investigators, and Dmitri's protection evaporates. Without his political shield, he's just another criminal waiting to be prosecuted. Won't he come after you for this? Lena asked. Probably, but I'll be ready. Victor's smile was sharp and cold. And once his empire starts crumbling, his people will abandon him. Rats always flee sinking ships. As they drove back to the bunker, Lena processed everything she'd witnessed. The violence, the strategy, the cold calculation that Victor applied to every decision, but also the restraint. He could have killed everyone at each location, but he'd offered surrender. He could have tortured the prisoners for sport, but he'd kept it clinical and purpose-driven. He operated in darkness, but he maintained his own twisted sense of honor. "What are you thinking?" Victor asked quietly. "That you're not a monster," Lena said. "You do monstrous things, but you're not a monster. There's a difference." Victor was silent for a moment. "Most people wouldn't see the distinction." "I'm not most people. Not anymore." Lena met his eyes. "I've spent 3 years being protected from this darkness, being kept innocent and separate. But innocence is just another word for ignorance, isn't it? The darkness was always there. You just shielded me from seeing it. And now that you've seen it? Now I understand the price of safety, the cost of protection." Lena reached out and took his hand, the first time she'd voluntarily touched him beyond necessity. "Now I can make an informed choice, instead of running away from shadows I didn't understand." Victor's fingers closed around hers, and his expression cracked open with something that looked like hope mixed with fear. "Have you made your choice?" he asked carefully. "Not yet." Lena squeezed his hand. "But I'm getting closer." Back at the bunker, Victor spent hours coordinating the release of Dimitri's financial records to carefully selected journalists and federal contacts. Lena watched him work, seeing the strategic mind that operated behind the violence. This was Victor's true power, not the guns or the muscle, but the chessmaster brain that saw 15 moves ahead and positioned pieces with devastating precision. "It's done," Victor finally said, closing his laptop. "By tomorrow morning, Dimitri's political protection will be under federal investigation. By tomorrow night, his empire will be in freefall. And the threat to me? Diminishing. Once Dimitri's organization collapses, there won't be resources or coordination for attacks. And once he's arrested, which should happen within 72 hours, he'll have much bigger concerns than revenge." Victor stood and stretched, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. He'd been operating on adrenaline and caffeine for over 30 hours. "You should sleep," Lena said. "So should you." They stood in the bunker's main room, awareness crackling between them like electricity. The bedroom door loomed. One bed, one room, the same space. For 3 years they'd maintained separate sleeping arrangements. But this wasn't their penthouse. This was a bunker with limited accommodations. "I can sleep on the couch," Victor offered. "Don't." Lena's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "We're adults. We can share a bed without anything happening." Victor's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes betrayed him, dark with longing and restraint. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." They prepared for bed with awkward formality, Lena changing in the bathroom while Victor stripped to athletic pants and a t-shirt in the bedroom. When she emerged in borrowed sleepwear, she found him already in bed, positioned on the far edge like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. Lena slipped under the covers on the opposite side, and they lay in the darkness with careful distance between them. She could hear his breathing, steady and controlled, could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could sense the tension in every muscle as he maintained his distance despite obviously wanting to close it. "Victor?" she said into the darkness. "Yes?" "Tell me about Katerina, your sister. What was she like?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then his voice came, soft and thick with old grief. "She was brilliant, funny. She wanted to be a doctor. She'd practice giving stitches on oranges and lecture our parents about their poor dietary choices." A pause. "She looked like our mother, dark hair, green eyes. She could argue anyone into submission and then make them laugh about losing. You loved her very much." "She was my best friend. When our parents died in a car accident, I was 22 and she was 14. I became her guardian. I was supposed to protect her." His voice cracked. "I failed." Lena turned on her side to face him, though she could barely make out his profile in the darkness. "It wasn't your fault. You were just a kid yourself." "I wasn't careful enough. I was building my organization, making enemies, and I didn't realize how vulnerable she was until it was too late." Victor's breathing hitched. "Dimitri took her to punish me for interfering with one of his shipments. He kept her for 3 months, Lena. 3 months of hell that I couldn't protect her from." Without thinking, Lena reached out and found his hand in the darkness. She laced her fingers through his and held on tight. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry that happened to her. To you." Victor rolled toward her, and suddenly they were inches apart, hands clasped between them like an anchor. "When I saw your name connected to Dmitri," Victor said, his voice rough, "all I could think about was Katerina, about what he'd do to you, about how I'd failed once and couldn't fail again. That's why I went to such extreme lengths, why I've been so controlling. I couldn't survive losing someone to him again." "You didn't lose me," Lena said. "I'm right here." "Are you?" Victor's free hand came up to cup her face in the darkness. "Or are you just trapped until you can escape?" "I don't know yet," Lena admitted. "But I'm here right now. That has to count for something." Victor's thumb stroked her cheekbone. That gesture again. Tender despite all the violence those hands had committed today. "It counts for everything," he whispered. They lay like that in the darkness, hands intertwined, Victor's palm warm against her face, their breaths mingling in the small space between them. Lena felt something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The understanding that this dangerous man had been shaped by loss and trauma just as she had. That his darkness was born from the same source as her fear. "Tell me something else," she said softly. "Something good about Katerina. A happy memory." And Victor did. He talked until his voice grew heavy with sleep, sharing stories of his sister who'd never gotten the chance to become the woman she was meant to be. Lena listened, holding his hand, understanding that this vulnerability was the greatest gift he could offer. When Victor finally slept, Lena remained awake, watching his face relax in the darkness. This man, this complicated, dangerous, damaged man, had offered her everything, his truth, his world, his heart. The question was whether she was brave enough to take it. Lena woke to find herself pressed against Victor's chest, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. Sometime during the night, they'd gravitated toward each other like magnets, crossing the careful distance they'd maintained. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, and his breathing remained deep and even with sleep. For a moment, she simply lay there, letting herself feel safe in a way she hadn't since before her father's betrayal. Then Victor's phone shattered the quiet with its sharp buzz. He came awake instantly. No grogginess, no disorientation. One moment asleep, the next completely alert. His arm tightened around Lena briefly before he seemed to realize their position and carefully extracted himself. "Chen," he answered, already moving toward the main room. "What's the situation?" Lena followed, watching as Victor pulled up news feeds on the monitors. Every major outlet was running the same story. Federal raids on multiple businesses connected to Dmitry Kozlov. Arrests, seizures, the kind of coordinated law enforcement action that only happened when someone very powerful decided to stop protecting you. "It's working faster than anticipated," Victor said into the phone. "Have our people confirmed Dmitry's location?" A pause. "Good. Keep eyes on him. I want to know the moment federal agents move in." He ended the call and turned to find Lena watching him. His hair was disheveled from sleep, and he still wore only the t-shirt and athletic pants from last night. He looked younger like this, less armored, though his eyes remained sharp with strategic thinking. "Dmitry's world is collapsing," Victor said. "Faster than even I projected. Apparently the federal prosecutor handling the case has been waiting years for enough evidence to move. Our leak gave her everything she needed." "So it's over?" "Not yet. Wounded animals are the most dangerous." Victor moved to start coffee, his movements automatic. "Dmitry knows I'm behind this. He'll want revenge before the federals take him down." "Meaning he'll come after me?" "Probably. Which is why you're staying here until he's in custody." Victor's tone left no room for argument. "Marcus is doubling security protocols. No one gets within 3 blocks of this location without us knowing." Lena accepted the coffee he handed her, noting how careful he was not to let their fingers touch. Last night's vulnerability had been locked away again behind professional distance. It should have relieved her. Instead, she felt an unexpected sense of loss. "What will you do?" she asked. "Wait. Plan. Prepare for whatever move Dmitry makes." Victor's jaw tightened. "And hope the federals move fast enough that I don't have to kill him myself." "Would you? If given the chance?" Victor met her eyes over the rim of his coffee cup. "Yes. Without hesitation. For Katerina, for you, for every person he's destroyed over the years. But a bullet would be too quick. I want him to rot in a federal prison, knowing that everything he built turned to ash. The cold fury in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Lena found herself understanding it. Some people didn't deserve mercy. Some sins were too great for forgiveness. I need to see my father, she said suddenly. Victor's expression shifted to surprise. Why? Because you showed me the truth about Dmitri, about what my father almost did to me. And I need to hear it from him. I need to understand how a parent could even consider selling their child. Lena, he's in rehabilitation. Seeing you might derail his progress. I don't care about his progress. The words came out sharper than intended. I care about closure. I care about looking him in the eye and understanding what kind of man raises a daughter for 23 years and then trades her like livestock. Victor studied her for a long moment. All right, but I'm coming with you. And we're taking a full security team. 2 hours later, they pulled up to the rehabilitation facility in a convoy that made the staff nervous. The director, a thin woman named Dr. Morrison, who clearly recognized Victor on sight, tried to protest the disruption, but Victor's donation check had been substantial enough to buy considerable flexibility. He's in the garden, Dr. Morrison said, her disapproval evident. Please don't upset him too much. He's been making excellent progress. His progress isn't my concern, Lena said coldly. His honesty is. Marcus and 2 other guards established a perimeter while Victor walked Lena to the garden. Her father sat on a bench near a small pond, looking older than she remembered. His hands trembled slightly, a permanent reminder of decades of alcohol abuse. When he looked up and saw her, his face crumpled with a complicated mixture of shame and joy. Lena, he breathed. I didn't expect... They said you might not come anymore. We need to talk, Lena cut him off, about Dmitri Kozlov. Her father's face went pale. His eyes darted to Victor, who stood a few feet behind Lena like a dark shadow. I don't know what you've heard, her father started, but I can explain. Explain how you were going to sell me to a human trafficker? Lena's voice was steady despite the rage burning in her chest. Explain how you were going to let Dmitri Kozlov put me in one of his clubs to pay off your gambling debts. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Lena moved closer, and her father flinched. Tell me. Make me understand how a father does that to his daughter. Her father's hands shook harder. Tears streamed down his weathered face. I was desperate. I owed so much money, and they were going to kill me. Dmitri said he'd forgive everything if I just what? Worked in his clubs? Serviced his clients? Let him destroy me the way you'd already destroyed yourself? He said it would just be hostessing. Her father's voice cracked. He said you'd just serve drinks and look pretty, and that would be enough to clear the debt. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what he really meant. You knew. Victor's voice cut through like a blade. I have the recordings, Thomas. Dmitri was very explicit about his plans for Lena, about how profitable a young, educated girl would be, about how much certain clients would pay for her innocence. Her father buried his face in his hands, sobbing. I was drunk. I was so drunk I could barely think straight. And I was so scared. They'd already broken my fingers as a warning. They said next time it would be my neck. So you chose your life over mine. Lena's voice was hollow. Your daughter's safety meant less to you than your own survival. I'm sorry, her father wept. I'm so sorry. I was weak. I've always been weak. Your mother knew it. She tried to protect you from me, and then she died, and there was no one to stop me from making terrible choices. Mom didn't die, Lena said quietly. She killed herself. Because living with you, with your addiction and your debts, and your endless broken promises was worse than death. Her father's head snapped up. That's not... The doctor said it was an accident. The doctors lied because you paid them to. Victor's voice was matter-of-fact. The coroner's original report noted deliberate overdose. You had it changed to accidental death for the insurance payout. Lena felt something inside her shatter and reform into something harder. All these years she'd believed her mother's death was a tragic accident, but it had been escape. Her mother had chosen death over continuing to live in the prison of her father's addiction. I want you to say it, Lena said, her voice dangerous. I want you to admit what you were going to do to me, all of it, every detail. Her father looked at Victor desperately, as if the man who'd saved Lena might somehow save him too. But Victor's expression was carved from ice. Tell her, Victor said. Tell her everything, or I'll play the recordings right here. So her father told her. Haltingly, through tears and shame, he described the deal he'd made with Dmitri, how Dmitri had shown him pictures of the clubs, how he'd explained that pretty girls with education could earn out debts faster, how he'd promised that Lena would be treated well, kept clean, given nice clothes, how her father had convinced himself it would be temporary, just a few months until the debt was cleared. I told myself you'd understand, her father whispered, that you'd do it for family, that you'd forgive me eventually. Forgive you? Lena's laugh was brittle. You wanted me to forgive you for selling me into sexual slavery? I didn't think of it like that. I couldn't. If I'd let myself think of it like that, I couldn't have. Exactly. Victor's voice was colder than Lena had ever heard it. You couldn't face what you were doing, so you lied to yourself. Told yourself pretty stories about clubs and hostessing and temporary arrangements. Anything to avoid admitting you were trading your daughter's body and soul to save your worthless life. Her father crumpled, and Lena felt nothing. No pity, no love, no connection to this broken man who'd prioritized his comfort over her safety. I have one more question, Lena said. When Victor offered the marriage contract instead, did you feel relieved or disappointed that you wouldn't get to erase the debt yourself? Relieved, her father looked up desperately. So relieved. Victor promised you'd be safe, that you'd want for nothing, that you'd have a good life even if it wasn't the life you'd planned. And you believed him? Just like that? I didn't have a choice. Victor made it very clear what would happen if I refused his offer or if I ever contacted Dmitri again. Her father's eyes flickered to Victor with obvious fear. He said he'd protect you from everyone, including me. He was right to, Lena said, because you were never my father. Not really. You were just a man who happened to raise me between card games and bottles, and now you're just a stranger I used to know. Lena, please. I'm done, she turned to Victor. I'm ready to leave. As they walked away, her father called out behind them, his voice breaking. I love you. I know I failed you, but I've always loved you. Lena didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the words, because love without protection was meaningless. Love without sacrifice was just selfishness wearing a prettier name. Her father loved her the way an addict loves their drug, desperately, harmfully, ultimately destructively. In the car, she sat in silence while Marcus drove them back to the bunker. Victor didn't try to comfort her or fill the quiet with meaningless platitudes. He simply took her hand and held it, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. Thank you, Lena finally said. For what? For being honest with me. For showing me the recordings instead of letting me live in ignorance. For protecting me even when I didn't know I needed protecting. Victor's grip tightened on her hand. I wish I could have spared you that conversation. I needed it. I needed to see him clearly. Lena turned to look at Victor's profile. Strong jaw, focused eyes, the face of a man who made hard choices without flinching. My whole life, I thought he was weak, but ultimately well-meaning. Now I know the truth. He's not weak. He's selfish. There's a difference. Yes, there is. You're not selfish, Lena said quietly. Everything you've done, all the violence and control and surveillance, it was all to protect me. You could have demanded so much more for your trouble, could have made the marriage real from the start, could have treated me like the property my father wanted to sell me as. But you didn't. Because you're not property. You're... Victor stopped, his jaw tightening. I'm what? Everything. The word came out rough, raw. You're everything, Lena. You have been from the moment I saw you, and I know that's terrifying to hear. I know it sounds obsessive and unhealthy and probably unstable. But it's the truth. You asked me to be honest, so I'm being honest. You're everything to me. The car pulled into the bunker's garage, but neither of them moved to get out. They sat in the back seat, hands still clasped, the weight of Victor's confession hanging between them. I don't know how to be someone's everything, Lena whispered. I don't know if I'm capable of that kind of importance. You don't have to do anything. You just have to exist. Victor turned to face her fully. But I need you to make your choice, Lena. I can't keep existing in this limbo. Either you stay and we build something real, or you go and I let you disappear. But I need to know. Tonight. Before Dmitri makes whatever desperate move he's planning. Why tonight? Because once the bullets start flying again, I need to know what I'm protecting. Whether I'm keeping you safe so you can leave me, or keeping you safe so you can stay. Before Lena could respond, Victor's phone rang. He answered it with visible frustration. This better be urgent, Chen. Whatever Chen said made Victor's expression go hard. When? How many? All right. Lock down the bunker. Full protocols. I'm on my way to the command center. He ended the call and looked at Lena with something close to fear in his eyes. Dmitri knows where we are. He's mobilizing every asset he has left for one final assault. The Federals are moving to arrest him, but they're still an hour out. We have maybe 30 minutes before he arrives with everything he's got. Then we fight, Lena said, surprised by her own certainty. No, you hide. There's a panic room 3 levels down. Steel walls, independent ventilation, supplies for a week. You go there now, and you don't come out until I personally come get you. Absolutely not. Lena, this isn't negotiable. You're right. It's not. She squeezed his hand hard enough to hurt. I'm not hiding while you fight my battles. Not anymore. If Dmitri wants me, he'll have to go through both of us. You don't know how to fight? Then give me a gun and teach me the basics. We have 30 minutes. Victor stared at her like he'd never seen her before. Then, incredibly, he laughed. A short, sharp sound that held equal parts disbelief and admiration. You're serious? Completely. You wanted me to choose your world? This is me choosing. All of it. The violence, the danger, the standing beside you instead of cowering behind you. Victor cupped her face with both hands, and his eyes blazed with something fierce and possessive. If you stay with me after this, if we survive this, I'm never letting you go. You understand that? You'll be mine completely. No contracts, no escape clauses, no divorce papers. I understand. And you're choosing this anyway? Yes. Lena covered his hands with hers. I'm choosing you, Victor. I'm choosing us. Now stop wasting time and teach me how to shoot. The next 20 minutes were a crash course in violence. Victor showed her how to hold a handgun, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling, how to reload, how to clear a jam. Marcus brought her a bulletproof vest and showed her how to move in it. Stay low, use cover, never expose yourself unnecessarily. Most important rules, Victor said, his hand steadying hers as she aimed at a practice target. You don't shoot to wound. You don't shoot to warn. If you pull this trigger, you shoot to kill. Center mass. Keep firing until the threat stops moving. Understand? Yes. Show me. Lena fired. The recoil surprised her, but Victor's hands kept her steady. She fired again and again. By the 6th shot, she was hitting the target consistently. Good, Victor said. You're a natural. Now let's hope you never have to use it. They set up defensive positions throughout the bunker. Victor's team, 15 men total, took strategic locations. Marcus positioned himself at the main entrance with a rifle that looked like it could punch through tank armor. Victor stayed near the command center where he could coordinate the defense. And Lena, despite Victor's visible anxiety about her position, took a spot behind reinforced cover where she could provide supporting fire if anyone breached the inner defenses. I hate this, Victor said, checking her position one final time. I hate that you're in danger. I hate that I couldn't protect you better. I hate that Dmitri is forcing this confrontation. Well, then make him regret it, Lena said simply. Victor kissed her then, hard and desperate and claiming. It was their first real kiss, and it tasted like gunpowder and coffee, and 3 years of restrained longing finally unleashed. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with promise. When this is over, he said, I'm taking you to bed, and I'm not letting you leave it for a week. Promises, promises. Then the monitors lit up with movement, 20 vehicles approaching from multiple directions, easily 100 men, everything Dmitri had left, thrown at this one final assault. Here we go, Victor said, moving to his position. Remember, Stay down, stay covered, and if things go wrong, you run for the panic room. Promise me." "I promise." A lie, but a kind one. Lena had no intention of running while Victor fought for their lives. The assault began with an explosion that rocked the bunker's foundations. Dimitri's people had brought serious ordnance, shaped charges that blew through the garage's reinforced doors. Smoke and fire filled the monitors as armed men poured through the breach. Victor's voice crackled over the radio, calm despite the chaos. "Let them come. Funnel them into kill zones. Controlled fire. We have limited ammunition. Make every shot count." The gunfight that followed was nothing like the clean, quick violence Lena had witnessed at the warehouses. This was brutal, grinding combat. Dimitri's men kept coming in waves, accepting horrific casualties to push deeper into the bunker. Victor's team fought with professional discipline, but they were outnumbered 5-1. Lena watched on her screen as positions fell one by one. First the garage, then the outer corridor. Victor was calling tactical retreats, pulling his people back to more defensible positions, but they were running out of bunker to defend. Then her screen showed something that made her blood freeze. 3 men had bypassed the main fighting and were moving through a maintenance tunnel, heading straight for the command center, heading for Victor. She grabbed her radio. "Victor, 3 hostiles, maintenance tunnel, heading your way." "I see them. Marcus, can you redirect?" "Negative, boss. We're pinned down at the north entrance." Victor would be alone when those 3 men reached him, and he was coordinating the entire defense. If he fell, the whole operation collapsed. Lena made her choice. She moved from her position, keeping low like Marcus had taught her. The maintenance tunnel entrance was 40 feet away. The 3 men were focused ahead, not watching their backs. Lena's hand shook as she raised the gun Victor had given her. "Center mass, squeeze, don't pull. Keep firing until the threat stops." She fired. The first man dropped. The other 2 spun toward her, weapons rising. Lena fired again. Emptying her magazine in a blind panic. 1 man went down. The third took cover and returned fire. Bullets sparked off the concrete inches from Lena's head. She ducked behind a support column, hands trembling as she tried to reload like Victor had shown her. The magazine wouldn't seat properly. She was going to die because she couldn't reload a stupid gun. Then Victor was there, appearing from nowhere, his own weapon raised. He fired 3 times with mechanical precision. The third man crumpled. Victor grabbed Lena and pulled her behind better cover, his hands running over her frantically. "Are you hit? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. I'm sorry. I know you told me to stay put, but they were going to flank you and I couldn't. You saved my life." Victor's voice was strange, thick. "You could have run to the panic room, could have saved yourself. Instead, you saved me." "Of course I did. I chose you, remember?" Something shifted in Victor's expression, the last wall between them finally crumbling. He kissed her again, harder than before, pouring 3 years of denied hunger into it. When he pulled back, his eyes burned with possession and promise. "When this is over," he said, "you're mine. Completely. Forever. No takebacks. I'm counting on it." The sound of sirens cut through the gunfire. Federal agents arriving in force, drawn by the sounds of combat and their impending arrest warrant for Dimitri. Over the radio, Lena heard Chen reporting that Dimitri himself had been spotted outside the bunker, screaming orders at his men. "He came personally," Victor said, something dark and satisfied in his voice. "He couldn't resist being here for my destruction. That's going to be his downfall." "What do you mean?" "I mean, federal agents are about to find Dmitry Kozlov at the scene of a major assault, armed to the teeth, in the middle of committing multiple felonies." Victor's smile was sharp as a knife. "He'll spend the rest of his life in a supermax prison. No deals, no reduced sentences, just concrete walls and the knowledge that I destroyed everything he built." The federal raid was overwhelming. Heavily armed agents swarmed the location, taking Dimitri's people into custody. The gunfire stopped as attackers threw down weapons and surrendered en masse. Over the monitors, Lena watched federal agents tackle Dimitri himself, driving him to the ground and zip-tying his hands while he screamed obscenities and threats. "It's over," Victor said quietly. Finally over. They emerged from the bunker to find organized chaos. Federal agents processing prisoners, paramedics treating wounded, and fire crews containing the damage from the explosions. A senior FBI agent approached Victor with a neutral expression. Mr. Calderon, interesting timing. Special Agent Rodriguez. Victor's voice was perfectly calm. I'm glad you arrived when you did. Dmitry Kozlov just attempted to murder me and my wife in our private residence. I'm happy to provide a full statement. Rodriguez's expression suggested she knew exactly what game Victor was playing but couldn't prove it. I'm sure you are. We'll need to talk about how exactly you acquired the evidence that led to today's raids. Anonymous tip, Victor said blandly. I'm as surprised as you are that it proved accurate. Right. Anonymous. Rodriguez looked at Lena, and her expression softened slightly. Mrs. Calderon, are you all right? I'm fine, Lena said, moving closer to Victor's side. His arm came around her waist immediately, possessive and protective. Thanks to my husband. Rodriguez studied them both for a moment, then nodded. We'll be in touch. Try to stay out of trouble, Mr. Calderon. Always my intention, Agent Rodriguez. As the federal agents continued their work, Victor guided Lena away from the chaos. They were both covered in concrete dust and smoke residue. Lena had a cut on her cheek from flying debris, and Victor's knuckles were bloodied. But they were alive. Together. Victorious. I need to check on my people, Victor said. Make sure everyone's accounted for. Then we're leaving this city for a while. Somewhere quiet where we can recover. I'd like that. Lena. Victor turned her to face him fully. What you did in there, coming to help me instead of running, that was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. Both, probably. Definitely both. His hands framed her face. But it proved something to me. Proved that when you choose something, you choose it completely. No half measures, no retreat. You're all in or all out. Is that a problem? No. Victor's thumb traced her lower lip. That's exactly what I needed to know, because what I'm about to offer you isn't a half measure either. It's everything, total commitment, complete partnership, a real marriage in every sense. I already said yes. You said yes in the middle of a firefight. I want you to say yes now, in the aftermath, when you've had time to process what staying with me really means. Victor's expression was vulnerable in a way that made Lena's heart ache. Say yes now, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. Lena looked at this complicated, dangerous, devoted man. This man who'd saved her from a fate worse than death, who'd given her 3 years of safety while denying his own needs, who'd shown her the darkest parts of his world and trusted her to accept them, who'd just fought off an army to keep her safe. Yes, she said clearly. Yes to you, yes to us, yes to everything that comes with choosing this life. Victor's control shattered. He pulled her against him and kissed her with desperate intensity, and Lena kissed him back with equal fervor. 3 years of distance collapsed into raw need and claimed promises. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. I've loved you for 3 years. I'll love you for the rest of my life. I love you too, Lena whispered, and meant it. Somewhere between the violence and the truth and the choosing, she'd fallen for this dark, protective, impossible man. Now take me somewhere we can be alone. Victor's eyes darkened with promise and heat. Your wish is my command, Mrs. Calderon. Victor kept his word. Within 6 hours, they were on a private plane heading to a coastal property he owned in Maine, remote, secure, and far from the chaos they'd left behind. Marcus had stayed in the city to coordinate cleanup and ensure Victor's interests remained protected, while federal prosecutors dismantled what remained of Dmitry's empire. The rest of Victor's team dispersed to safe houses, paid handsomely for their loyalty and their discretion. Now, as Lena watched the Atlantic Ocean crash against rocky cliffs through floor-to-ceiling windows, she felt the adrenaline finally draining from her system. They'd showered separately after arriving, both too exhausted and overwhelmed for the intimacy Victor had promised. But now, clean and wearing comfortable clothes, they stood in the main room of the beach house like strangers trying to remember how to be alone together. You should eat something, Victor said, moving toward the kitchen that had been stocked by his staff prior to their arrival. Neither of us has had a real meal in over 24 hours. I'm not hungry. Lena, I killed 2 men today. The words came out flat, emotionless. I ended 2 human lives, and I don't feel anything about it. Shouldn't I feel something? Victor stopped, turned to face her fully. What do you think you should feel? Guilt, horror, remorse, something other than this numbness. Lena wrapped her arms around herself. Does that make me a monster? No. Victor moved closer, and his voice gentled. It makes you someone in shock. Someone whose brain is protecting itself from processing trauma it's not ready to handle yet. The feelings will come later. Trust me. How do you know? Because I've been where you are. After my first kill, I felt nothing for 3 days. Then it hit me all at once, and I couldn't stop throwing up for hours. Victor's expression held old pain. Katerina held me through it. Told me I wasn't broken. Told me feeling nothing was normal when you're just trying to survive. Lena's eyes burned with unshed tears. I don't regret it. They were going to kill you. I'd do it again to protect you, but I don't know what that says about who I am. It says you're strong, capable, willing to do hard things for people you love. Victor closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. It says you're exactly who I thought you were from the moment I saw you in that gallery. Someone with steel beneath the softness. Someone who could survive in my world without being destroyed by it. Lena buried her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, soap, and something uniquely Victor that made her feel grounded. I'm scared. Of what? Of how easily I adapted to the violence. Of how natural it felt to pull that trigger. Of becoming someone I don't recognize. She pulled back to look at him. What if I lose myself in your world? What if I become just another person who solves problems with bullets? You won't. Victor's certainty was absolute. Because you're asking these questions. Because you're afraid of that transformation. The people who lose themselves in violence are the ones who stop questioning it, stop feeling the weight of it. You'll never be that person, Lena. How can you be sure? Because I know you. I've watched you for 3 years. Watched you choose kindness even when you had every reason to be bitter. Watched you rebuild yourself after your father's betrayal. Watched you extend grace to people who didn't deserve it. His hands cradled her face. Today you did what was necessary to survive. That doesn't erase who you are at your core. Lena let his words sink in, let them provide the absolution she needed to hear. Then she asked the question that had been burning in her mind since they'd boarded the plane. What happens now? With us? Victor's expression shifted to something hungry and possessive. Now I keep the promise I made. Now I make this marriage real in every way. Now I claim what's mine, if you're still willing. Heat flared low in Lena's belly. I'm willing. I've never done this before. Victor went very still. Never? I dated in college, but nothing serious. And then after my father's debts, after the contract, I couldn't imagine letting anyone close enough to... She gestured vaguely. I'm 26 years old and completely inexperienced. If that changes things... Changes things? Victor's laugh was rough. Lena, the only thing that changes is how careful I need to be with you, how much patience I need to exercise, because everything in me wants to take you to bed right now and spend the next week making up for 3 years of restraint. Then do it. The words came out breathier than intended. I chose this. I chose you. I don't need patience or careful. I need you to show me what this marriage really means. Victor's control visibly cracked. His eyes darkened to almost black, and his grip on her face tightened just enough to make her breath catch. You don't know what you're asking for? Then show me. He kissed her, and this kiss was nothing like the desperate claiming in the bunker or the promise at the beach house. This kiss was deliberate, consuming, a preview of exactly what he'd been holding back for 3 years. His tongue swept into her mouth with confident possession, and Lena made a sound she'd never heard herself make before, needy and surrendering. Victor lifted her effortlessly, and her legs wrapped around his waist on instinct. He carried her through the beach house to the master bedroom, never breaking the kiss, his hands supporting her weight like she was something precious and claimed all at once. The bedroom was all windows and ocean views, but Lena barely noticed. Victor laid her on the massive bed with surprising gentleness, then stepped back. His chest heaved with controlled breathing, and his eyes tracked over her like she was something he'd hunted and finally caught. "Last chance," he said, his voice rough. "You can still change your mind. Still tell me you need more time. I'll wait, Lena. I've waited 3 years. I can wait longer if you need it." "I don't need more time." Lena sat up, reaching for the hem of her shirt. "I need you to stop treating me like I'm fragile. I made my choice. Stop giving me exits." Something fierce flashed across Victor's face. "All right, but we do this my way, which means you follow my lead. You tell me if anything hurts or scares you, and you trust me to make this good for you. Understood?" "Yes." "Yes what?" The question held weight, implication, a test of how far she was willing to surrender. "Yes, Victor," Lena said, meeting his eyes. "I understand." His smile was dark and promising. "Good girl." He moved toward her with predatory grace, and Lena's breath caught. This was Victor unleashed. No distance, no restraint, no carefully maintained boundaries. This was the man who'd been denying himself for 3 years, finally taking what he'd wanted all along. Victor's hands were surprisingly gentle as he removed her clothing piece by piece, his eyes drinking in every new inch of exposed skin like he was memorizing her. When she lay bare before him, vulnerable and trembling slightly, he traced one finger from her collarbone to her navel. "Beautiful," he murmured. "Even better than I imagined. And I've imagined this more times than I can count." "Show me," Lena's voice came out husky. "Show me what you imagined." Victor showed her, with hands and mouth and whispered words that made her blush and arch, and discover parts of herself she hadn't known existed. He was patient despite his obvious hunger, teaching her body to respond to his touch, coaxing pleasure from her with expert precision. When she finally shattered beneath his hands, crying out his name, he watched her with satisfaction and possession burning in his dark eyes. "Again," he demanded, and proceeded to take her apart twice more before she was begging him for something more, something she couldn't even name but needed desperately. Only then did Victor remove his own clothing, revealing a body marked with scars that told stories of violence survived. Lena traced one particularly vicious scar across his ribs with trembling fingers. "Knife fight," Victor said. 4 years ago. The other guy didn't survive." "Do they all have stories?" "Yes. Some I'll tell you eventually. Others I'll take to my grave." He caught her exploring hand and brought it to his mouth, pressing a kiss to her palm. "But tonight isn't about my past. Tonight is about our future." He moved over her, positioning himself carefully, and Lena felt her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. The final boundary between who she'd been and who she was becoming. "Look at me," Victor commanded softly. "I want to see your eyes when I make you mine." Lena met his gaze and held it as he entered her with careful control. There was pain, brief and sharp, and then a fullness that made her gasp. Victor held completely still, giving her time to adjust, his muscles trembling with the effort of restraint. "Okay?" His voice was strained. "Yes, move. Please move." Victor began to move with measured control, watching her face for any sign of discomfort. But Lena felt only pleasure building again, different than before, but just as overwhelming. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, and Victor's control finally snapped. He took her with possessive intensity, claiming every sound she made, every expression that crossed her face. And when Lena shattered again with him buried deep inside her, Victor followed with a groan that sounded like 3 years of denial finally finding release. They lay tangled together afterward, sweat slicked and breathing hard. Victor's hand traced lazy patterns on her hip, and Lena felt changed in ways that had nothing to do with physical innocence lost and everything to do with walls demolished. "Are you all right?" Victor asked eventually. "Better than all right." Lena turned in his arms to face him. I didn't know it could be like that." "It's not. Not usually." Victor's expression was serious. "That's what happens when you wait 3 years for someone, when you care about them more than you care about your next breath. When making them feel good becomes more important than your own pleasure." "You did make me feel good. Very good. Repeatedly." His smile was smug and masculine. I'm aware. I was there for all 4 times you came apart in my arms. Lena blushed, which made Victor laugh and pull her closer. They lay like that as the sun set over the ocean, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. Lena traced the scars on Victor's chest, and he told her stories, some violent, some merely dangerous, all part of the life he'd lived before her. What about this one? She touched a small scar near his heart. Bullet. Grazed me during a warehouse raid gone wrong. 2 inches to the left and it would have killed me. Victor's hand covered hers. That was 6 months before I saw you in the gallery. 6 months before I knew you existed. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that bullet had been 2 inches left. If I died without ever meeting you. Don't. Lena pressed her palm flat against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. Don't think about that. I can't help it. My whole life changed the moment I saw you, Lena. Everything I'd built, everything I'd survived, suddenly had a purpose beyond just accumulating power and taking revenge for Katerina. Suddenly I had something to protect beyond myself. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. I know, and I'm sorry if it feels overwhelming, but I need you to understand what you mean to me. You're not just my wife. You're not just the woman I love. You're the reason I want to be better than I am. The reason I want to build something beyond violence and shadows. Lena propped herself up on one elbow to look at him properly. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to transition my business. Keep the legitimate enterprises, divest from the illegal ones. It'll take time. You don't just walk away from an empire overnight, but I want to give you a life that isn't constantly threatened by enemies and federal investigations. You do that? Give up that much power? For you, I'd give up everything. Victor's expression was absolutely sincere. I've spent years building an empire because I had nothing else to build. But now I have you. Now I have us. And that's more valuable than any amount of power or money. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. I'm not asking you to give up who you are. You're not asking. I'm offering. Because who I am has changed, Lena. 3 years ago, I was a man who'd given up on anything beyond survival and revenge. Now I'm a man who has a future to build, a wife to protect. Maybe someday, a family to raise. Family? Lena's heart skipped. Not immediately, Victor said quickly. We have time, years to just be us before we think about children. But someday? Yes. I want that with you. Want to give some child the safety and love that Katerina never got to experience. Want to build something good out of all this darkness. Lena kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. I want that too, someday, after we figure out how to be married without a contract between us. Speaking of which, Victor shifted, reaching toward the nightstand. He pulled out a folder that had somehow materialized in the beach house despite them fleeing the city with almost nothing. I had my lawyers prepare something. Lena took the folder with trembling hands and opened it to find legal documents. Not a contract this time. A post-nuptial agreement that gave her equal ownership in all of Victor's legitimate businesses. Hotels, restaurants, real estate holdings, millions of dollars worth of assets now jointly held. Victor, I can't accept this. You can and you will. You're my wife, my partner. That means you get half of everything I've built. His voice was firm. More than that, it means you have the power to keep me honest. To push me toward legitimate business when I'm tempted to take easier, darker paths. To be my conscience when mine fails. What if I make mistakes? What if I'm terrible at business? Then we'll learn together. But I don't think you'll be terrible. You have a degree in economics, remember? And you're brilliant when you let yourself be. Victor pulled her back against his chest. Besides, I have excellent advisors. They'll help you learn the ropes. Lena set the folder aside and turned in his arms. You're giving me real power, real authority. That's not something most men in your world would do. I'm not most men. And you're not most women. Victor's hand slid into her hair, tilting her face up to his. You stood beside me during a firefight. You killed to protect me. You chose my world knowing exactly how dark it gets. The least I can do is give you the power to help reshape that world into something better. I love you. The words came easier now. I really, genuinely love you, Victor Calderon. I love you too, Lena Calderon. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly. Now let me show you exactly how much. He proceeded to demonstrate his love repeatedly through the night, teaching Lena's body new heights of pleasure, pushing her boundaries gently but inexorably. By the time dawn light crept through the windows, they were both exhausted and sated and utterly claimed by each other. They spent 3 days in Maine, isolated from the world, learning each other without the pressure of contracts or enemies or expectations. Victor taught Lena about his business operations, the legitimate ones he wanted to expand and the illegal ones he planned to divest from. Lena shared her own ideas, her education in economics proving valuable as she identified inefficiencies and opportunities Victor's male-dominated world had overlooked. You see this restaurant chain? Lena pointed at financial reports spread across the kitchen table where they'd been working. It's underperforming because the locations are all in business districts. But families are where the real money is. If we opened locations in suburban areas with family-friendly menus and atmospheres, revenue would triple. Victor studied the numbers she'd compiled, and his expression shifted to impressed. You figured this out in 3 hours? The data was all there. Your analysts just weren't asking the right questions. Lena met his eyes. This is what I can bring to your empire, Victor. Not violence or intimidation, perspective. A different way of seeing opportunities. Our empire, Victor corrected. And you're absolutely right. I'm calling my restaurant division head tomorrow and putting you in charge of the expansion. I don't have any experience running restaurants. You'll learn, and you'll be brilliant at it. Victor pulled her into his lap, documents scattering. This is exactly what I meant about being partners. You bring skills I don't have. Vision. I've been too focused on survival to develop. Together, we're unstoppable. On the 4th day, Marcus called with news that couldn't wait. Dmitri had been formally charged with dozens of federal crimes, including human trafficking, weapons violations, and attempted murder. The prosecutors were seeking life without parole. His organization had completely collapsed. Lieutenants were cutting deals, assets were being seized, and the power vacuum was being filled by less violent operators. It's over, Marcus said, and even through the phone, Lena could hear his relief. Dimitri's done. He'll die in prison. Good, Victor said simply. What about our operations? Any blowback from the federal investigation? Nothing concrete. Agent Rodriguez knows you were involved in leaking the information, but she can't prove it. And honestly, I think she's grateful. Dmitri was a monster she'd been trying to bring down for years. Your evidence made it possible. She say anything about the assault on the bunker? Self-defense. Clean shoot for you and your people. The 3 men Mrs. Calderon took down are being classified the same way. Marcus paused. Boss, the lady did good. Real good. Word spreading through the organization. You've got a wife who'll kill to protect you. That's earning you serious respect. Victor's arm tightened around Lena's waist. She's remarkable. Anything else? Your lawyer wants to know when you're coming back to the city. There are decisions that need to be made about transitioning the business. Tell him next week. We're taking some time to adjust to being actually married. Marcus chuckled. Understood, boss. Enjoy yourselves. After the call, Lena turned in Victor's lap to face him. Respect? Because I killed people? Because you protected what's yours. Victor's expression was serious. In my world, loyalty is everything. You demonstrated ultimate loyalty that matters to people whose lives depend on trust. I don't want to be known as the wife who kills people. You won't be. You'll be known as the wife who stands beside her husband, who shares his risks, who has the steel to survive in a dangerous world. Victor kissed her softly. But I understand if you don't want involvement in that side of the business. You can focus entirely on legitimate operations if you prefer. Lena considered this. Part of her wanted exactly that, clean separation from violence and criminality. But another part, the part that had emerged during the firefight, understood that naivety was its own kind of danger. I want to know everything, she finally said, even the parts you're divesting from. I want to understand the full scope of what we're building and what we're leaving behind. How can I help guide us toward legitimacy if I don't understand what we're transitioning away from? Victor studied her face carefully. That means seeing things that will disturb you, meeting people who do terrible things, understanding exactly how dark my world gets. I've already killed people, Victor. I think I've earned the right to know exactly what empire I'm helping you reshape. All right. When we return to the city, I'll show you everything. The weapons operations were closing down, the gambling rings were selling off, the money laundering were transitioning to legitimate financial services. All of it. And then? And then we build something new. Something Katerina would have been proud of. Victor's voice roughened slightly. An empire that protects people instead of preying on them. That generates wealth through creation instead of extraction. That my children, our children, could inherit without shame. Lena wrapped her arms around his neck. That's a beautiful vision. It's our vision now, yours and mine together. They made love again, slower this time, savoring each touch and kiss. Afterward, lying in satisfied exhaustion, Lena asked the question that had been nagging at her. What happened to the divorce papers? The ones I signed? Victor was quiet for a moment. I burned them, the night of the attack. While you were sleeping in the bunker bedroom, I took them outside and set them on fire. Watched every page turn to ash. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to choose me freely. Not because the papers were already destroyed, but because you genuinely wanted to stay. Victor turned to face her. I needed to know that if I somehow produced new divorce papers tomorrow, you'd refuse to sign them. I would refuse. Lena traced his jawline. I'd tear them up myself and then drag you back to bed. Victor's smile was pure male satisfaction. Is that so? Absolutely. You're stuck with me now, Mr. Calderon, for better or worse, in violence and in peace, in darkness and in light. Those are some intense vows. We're some intense people. Lena kissed him. Traditional vows wouldn't cover what we've been through together. True. We should probably renew our vows properly, have a real ceremony where you're choosing me instead of being cornered into it. I'd like that. Something small, intimate, just us and the people who matter. Marcus will cry, Victor said seriously. He's secretly a romantic. Lena laughed. Marcus? The man who looks like he eats nails for breakfast? Absolute romantic. Wrote poetry in college before he joined the military. He'll deny it if you ask, but I have proof. Victor's expression was fond. He's been hoping for 3 years that we'd figure out we belong together. This will make his year. They spent the rest of their time in Maine planning their future, both the business transitions and the personal milestones. Lena wanted to finish her graduate degree in business administration, this time in person rather than remotely. Victor wanted to establish a foundation in Katerina's name to help trafficking survivors. Together, they wanted to build something that mattered beyond wealth accumulation. On their last night before returning to the city, they sat on the beach wrapped in blankets, watching stars emerge overhead. The Atlantic crashed rhythmically against the shore, and Lena felt more at peace than she had in years. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For saving me 3 years ago, for protecting me even when I resented it, for showing me the truth even when it was ugly, for loving me enough to let me choose freely. Victor pulled her closer against his side. Thank you for choosing me, for seeing past the monster to the man underneath, for standing beside me when you could have run, for loving me despite everything I am and everything I've done. You're not a monster, Victor. You're just a man who's done monstrous things to survive and protect people he loves. There's a difference. You keep saying that. I'm starting to believe it. Good. Because it's true. Lena turned to look at him in the starlight. We're both products of trauma and survival. Both of us did what we had to do to get through impossible situations. That doesn't make us monsters. It makes us survivors. Survivors who found each other. And who are building something beautiful together. Lena kissed him softly. I love you, Victor Calderon. My husband. My partner. My choice. I love you, Lena Calderon. My wife. My salvation. My everything. They sat on that beach until the stars wheeled overhead and dawn threatened on the horizon, holding each other, planning their future, and celebrating the marriage that had begun as a contract and transformed into something real and chosen and unbreakable. When they finally returned to the city, it was as true partners, equals in every way that mattered. The divorce papers were ash. The threats were eliminated. The future was theirs to build, and build it they would, together, transforming darkness into light, one deliberate choice at a time. The penthouse had been completely rebuilt in their absence, transformed from a war zone into something that felt less like a fortress and more like a home. Lena stood in the renovated study where she'd signed those divorce papers weeks ago, marveling at how different everything looked. The bullet holes were gone, replaced by warm wood paneling. The desk where she'd planned her escape now held their joint business files. Even the air felt different, lighter somehow, as if the violence had been scrubbed away along with the blood. "What do you think?" Victor asked from the doorway, watching her reaction carefully. "It's beautiful, but it feels strange being back here after everything. We can sell it if you prefer. Buy something new without the memories." Lena turned to face him. "No. This is where our real marriage began, where I stopped running and started choosing. I don't want to erase that." Victor crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "Then we keep it. Make new memories to overlay the violent ones." They'd been back in the city for 3 days, and each day brought new revelations as Victor made good on his promise to show Lena everything. She'd met with his legitimate business managers, reviewed financial statements, and begun implementing her ideas for expanding the restaurant chain. She'd also been introduced to the darker side. The men who ran his weapons operations, the enforcers who collected debts, the lawyers who specialized in keeping criminals out of prison. It was educational and disturbing in equal measure. But Lena had meant what she said about needing to understand the full scope of their empire. How could she help transition toward legitimacy if she didn't know what they were transitioning from? "Marcus wants to know if you're ready for the meeting," Victor said, checking his phone. "The buyers for the weapons operation are here." "Already? I thought that would take months to arrange." "Normally it would. But word spread fast that I'm divesting. Several interested parties emerged immediately." Victor's expression was carefully neutral. "These particular buyers are former military contractors. They run a legitimate security company that supplies private military forces to governments and corporations. They're not perfect, but they're better than some of the alternatives." Lena nodded, straightening her shoulders. "Then let's go meet them." The meeting took place in a conference room that overlooked the city. 3 men in expensive suits stood when Lena and Victor entered, their eyes immediately assessing. Lena recognized the look. They were trying to determine if she was decoration or substance. She'd seen it 100 times at Victor's business events over the past 3 years. "Gentlemen," Victor said smoothly, "thank you for coming. This is my wife and business partner, Lena Calderon. She'll be participating in all negotiations going forward." The lead buyer, a graying man named Harrison, extended his hand to Lena with barely concealed surprise. "Mrs. Calderon, I didn't realize you were involved in operations." "Recent development," Lena said, shaking his hand firmly, "but I'm a quick study." They spent the next 2 hours reviewing the weapons inventory, supply chains, and client lists. Lena stayed quiet for most of it, listening and learning. But when Harrison tried to lowball the asking price by claiming some of the inventory was outdated, she spoke up. "That's interesting," Lena said, pulling up data on her tablet. "Because according to the manifests, that particular shipment was acquired 4 months ago. The same models your company purchased from a German supplier last quarter for 30% more than what you're offering us now." Harrison's expression shifted from condescending to respectful. "You've done your homework." "I always do. So let's skip the negotiating games and talk real numbers. Your company needs this inventory to fulfill contracts you've already signed. We have exactly what you need at a fair market price. Either you pay it, or we move on to the next buyer." Victor's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. Pride radiated from him in waves. Harrison exchanged glances with his associates, then nodded. "Fair enough, Mrs. Calderon. Let's talk real numbers." By the end of the meeting, they'd agreed on a price that was 15% higher than Victor's original asking price. After the buyers left, Victor pulled Lena into his arms and kissed her thoroughly. "That was incredible," he said against her lips. "You just made us an additional $7 million. "I told you I could be useful." Lena smiled. "Economics degree, remember?" "Oh, I remember. I'm just kicking myself for not bringing you into the business sooner. You were busy keeping me in a gilded cage. A mistake I'm spending every day trying to correct." Whoa, Victor's expression turned serious. "But this is exactly what I meant about being partners. You see opportunities I miss. You ask questions I don't think to ask. Together, we're formidable." Over the next 2 weeks, they sold off the weapons operation, transferred the gambling rings to a consortium of former associates who promised to run them more ethically, and began the complex process of transitioning the money laundering through Victor's clubs into legitimate financial services. It was exhausting, complicated work that required lawyers, accountants, and careful negotiations with people who didn't appreciate losing income streams. But slowly, methodically, Victor's empire transformed. The legitimate businesses expanded while the criminal enterprises contracted. Revenue actually increased as they focused on profitable legal ventures rather than maintaining expensive illegal operations that constantly risked federal attention. Lena threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. She discovered she had a talent for business strategy, for seeing patterns in data that others missed. Victor's managers initially treated her with skepticism, but that changed after she identified a real estate opportunity that would eventually generate $40 million in profit. "The team is calling you the secret weapon," Marcus reported one afternoon, finding Lena in her new office reviewing acquisition proposals. "They're actually excited to work with you instead of just tolerating your presence." Lena looked up from the documents. "That's progress, I suppose." "More than progress. It's respect." Marcus leaned against the door frame. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Are you happy? Really happy? Because the boss, he's different now, lighter, but I need to know you're not just playing a role to survive." Lena set down her pen and gave Marcus her full attention. This mattered, not just her answer, but the fact that Victor had people who cared enough about him to ask uncomfortable questions. "I'm happier than I've ever been," she said honestly. 3 years ago, I was forced into a contract that terrified me. Now I'm choosing every day to build something meaningful with a man I genuinely love. That's not survival, Marcus. That's living. Marcus's scarred face softened. "Good. That's good. Because he deserves happiness after everything he's been through. And so do you. We're working on it, together. That's all anyone can do." Marcus straightened. "Oh, and the boss wanted me to remind you about the foundation meeting at 3. The Katerina Project is officially launching next month." The Katerina Project had become Lena's passion project alongside the business transitions. Victor had provided the funding, but Lena had developed the operational structure, a comprehensive program that helped trafficking survivors rebuild their lives through housing, education, therapy, and job training. They'd hired Dr. Morrison from her father's rehabilitation facility to run the program, along with a team of counselors and social workers. At the foundation meeting, they reviewed applications from the first group of survivors who would enter the program. Each file represented a person who'd endured horrors, similar to what Katerina had experienced. Each one deserved a chance at the life Katerina had been denied. "We can accommodate 12 in the first cohort," Dr. Morrison said, reviewing the facilities they'd secured. "After 6 months, we'll evaluate and potentially expand." "I want to expand sooner," Lena said. "There are 47 applications here, 47 people who need help now, not in 6 months. We don't have the infrastructure, then we build it faster." Lena looked at Victor. "What would it take to accelerate the timeline?" Victor studied the budget projections. "Another facility, more staff, approximately $5 million additional investment up front." "Do it." Lena's voice was firm. "We have the money. These people don't have time to wait while we move cautiously." Dr. Morrison looked shocked. "Mrs. Calderon, I appreciate the urgency, but rushing could compromise the quality of care. I'm not suggesting we compromise quality. I'm suggesting we move with the same urgency we'd want if it was our sister who needed help." Lena met the doctor's eyes. "Every day these people wait is another day they're struggling to survive. We can do better." Victor's hand covered hers on the table. "We'll do better. Dr. Morrison, draw up plans for the expanded program. I'll have the funds transferred by tomorrow." After the meeting, as they walked back to Victor's office, He pulled Lena aside into an empty conference room. His eyes were suspiciously bright. "What you just did in there," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The urgency, the passion, the refusal to accept unnecessary delays. Katerina would have loved you." "I wish I could have met her." "Me too. She would have been your biggest supporter, would have seen immediately what took me 3 years to admit, that you're extraordinary." Victor cupped her face. "Thank you for caring about her legacy, for making her matter even though she's gone. She matters because she mattered to you, because her loss shaped you into someone who'd risk everything to protect others from the same fate." Lena kissed him softly. The Katerina Project isn't just about helping survivors. It's about honoring who she was and who she would have become. They stood there holding each other until Victor's phone buzzed with an urgent message. He checked it, and his expression hardened. "What is it?" Lena asked. "Your father. He's checked himself out of rehabilitation against medical advice. Dr. Morrison says he's been sober for 8 months, but he's refusing to stay for the full program." Lena felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "Where is he now?" "No one knows. He left 3 hours ago and isn't answering his phone." Victor's jaw tightened. "Do you want me to find him?" The old Lena would have said yes immediately, would have dropped everything to chase after her father and try to save him from himself. But she wasn't that person anymore. She'd learned hard lessons about enabling versus helping, about setting boundaries versus sacrificing herself on the altar of someone else's bad choices. "No," she said quietly. "He's an adult. He gets to make his own decisions, even destructive ones. I'm not responsible for saving him from himself anymore." Victor studied her face carefully. "Are you sure? I know he's your father. He stopped being my father the moment he tried to sell me to Dmitri. Now he's just a man I used to know who made terrible choices." Lena's voice was steady. "If he wants help, he knows how to reach me. But I'm not chasing him anymore. I'm not sacrificing my peace for his chaos." "That's growth," Victor said approvingly. "Painful growth, but growth nonetheless." "It is painful. Part of me still wants to fix him, save him, make him into the father I needed him to be." Lena leaned into Victor's embrace. "But I'm learning that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. You can only protect yourself and build something better." And that's exactly what we're doing. 2 weeks later, they received news that Lena's father had been arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct in Atlantic City. He'd gambled away the modest stipend Victor had been providing and was being held on minor charges. The police wanted to know if Lena would post bail. She didn't. Instead, she wrote her father a letter explaining that she loved him but could no longer enable his self-destruction, that she'd paid for 8 months of rehabilitation and he'd chosen to throw that opportunity away, that if he ever genuinely wanted help, real help, not just rescue from consequences, she'd be there. But until then, she was protecting herself and the life she was building. Victor held her while she cried after mailing the letter, not for who her father was, but for who he'd never be. Grief for the relationship that had died long before she'd been old enough to recognize its toxicity. "I'm proud of you," Victor murmured into her hair. "I know that wasn't easy. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than killing those men in the bunker, harder than facing Dmitri's assault. Because this is choosing myself over someone I'm supposed to love unconditionally. Love shouldn't be unconditional when it's destroying you. You're allowed to protect yourself even from family." "I know, it just hurts." "I know it does." Victor held her tighter. "But you're not alone in this pain. I'm here. I'll always be here." 3 months after returning from Maine, they held a small vow renewal ceremony in the beach house where they'd first become truly married. Marcus stood as Victor's best man, tears streaming unashamedly down his scarred face, just as Victor had predicted. Dr. Morrison attended as Lena's witness, along with the first cohort of Katerina Project survivors who'd become unexpectedly important to both of them. Lena wore a simple white dress, nothing like the elaborate gown from their contracted wedding. Victor wore a dark suit without the armor of his usual business attire. They stood barefoot on the beach at sunset and spoke vows they'd written themselves. "3 years ago, I married you out of desperation," Lena said, her voice carrying over the ocean waves. "Today, I marry you out of choice. You showed me darkness, but you also showed me how to transform it into light. You protected me when I needed protection and freed me when I needed freedom. You gave me truth even when lies would have been easier. I love you, Victor Calderon. I choose you. Today and every day for the rest of our lives. Victor's hands trembled slightly as he held hers. 3 years ago, I married you thinking I was saving you. Today, I understand that you saved me. You took a man who'd built his life on violence and vengeance and showed him another way. You accepted my darkness without being destroyed by it. You chose partnership over escape. I love you, Lena Calderon. I choose you today and every day in light and shadow until my last breath. They exchanged new rings, simple gold bands engraved with the date they'd truly chosen each other, not the date they'd been forced together. When they kissed, Marcus actually sobbed, and several of the Katerina Project survivors applauded through their own tears. Afterward, they had a simple dinner on the beach house deck. The survivors shared stories of their progress, their hopes for the future. Dr. Morrison reported that the expanded program was exceeding all expectations. Marcus got pleasantly drunk and told embarrassing stories about Victor's early days building his empire. As the sun finally set and stars emerged overhead, Lena found herself standing at the deck railing with Victor's arms around her waist, looking out at the Atlantic and feeling more content than she'd ever imagined possible. Happy? Victor murmured against her neck. Incredibly. You? Beyond measure. He tightened his arms around her. I have you. I have a business that's becoming something I'm proud of instead of ashamed of. I have Katerina's legacy doing real good in the world. I have everything I never knew I needed. We have everything, Lena corrected. This is ours, Victor. Everything we've built together. 6 months later, the transformation of Victor's empire was largely complete. The criminal operations had been sold or shut down. The legitimate businesses were thriving under Lena's strategic guidance. The Katerina Project had expanded to help over 100 survivors and was being studied as a model program by other organizations. Dmitry Kozlov had been convicted on all charges and sentenced to life without parole in a supermax prison. The judge had been scathing in her condemnation, citing the extensive evidence of his crimes. Victor had attended the sentencing, and afterward he'd visited Katerina's grave for the first time in years. I told her it was over, he'd said to Lena that evening. That the man who destroyed her was going to die in a cage. That we'd built something good from all the pain. I think she would have approved. I know she would have. Now, standing in the penthouse study on the 1-year anniversary of the night Lena had signed those divorce papers, they reviewed the financial statements together. Legitimate revenue had increased by 40%. The restaurant expansion Lena had proposed was wildly successful. The real estate investments were paying off exactly as she'd projected. We did it, Victor said, pulling Lena onto his lap. We actually did it. Transformed an empire built on blood into something that creates value instead of extracting it. We're still doing it, Lena corrected. This is ongoing work, not a finished project. There will always be temptations to take shortcuts or return to old methods. Good thing I have you to keep me honest. Good thing I have you to protect what we're building. Lena kissed him softly. We're a team, Victor. Your strength and my strategy. Your experience and my fresh perspective. Your protection and my conscience. Perfect balance. Not perfect, but real, honest, chosen. Lena rested her forehead against his. I never thought I'd be grateful for that contract 3 years ago. But without it, I never would have met you, never would have discovered I'm capable of so much more than I believed, never would have learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone even when they're difficult and damaged and dangerous. Are you saying I'm difficult? Victor's eyes glinted with humor. Incredibly difficult. Also stubborn, controlling, and occasionally homicidal. And yet you love me anyway. And yet I love you anyway, Lena smiled. Because you're also loyal, protective, brilliant, and capable of extraordinary change. Because you see me as an equal instead of a possession. Because you gave me power instead of demanding submission. You took power, Victor corrected. I just had the good sense to recognize your worth and get out of your way. They sat together in the study where it had all begun, reviewing the empire they were building together and planning for a future that looked nothing like either of them had imagined. Lena had enrolled in graduate school and was finishing her MBA while managing several of their business divisions. Victor had become an advocate for criminal justice reform. using his experience to push for programs that helped people transition away from illegal enterprises. "I have something for you," Victor said eventually, reaching into his desk drawer. He pulled out a small box and handed it to Lena. Inside was a key. "What does this open?" she asked. "The deed is in your name alone, a building in the city. I thought you might want your own office, your own space to build your own ventures independent of mine." Victor's expression was serious. "You're brilliant, Lena. You don't need to spend your life managing my businesses. You should build your own." Lena stared at the key, overwhelmed. "Victor, I know you don't need it. I'm giving it anyway, because you're not just my wife or my business partner. You're your own person with your own dreams and goals, and I want to support those just like you've supported mine." "What if I fail? What if I build something and it crashes? Then you'll learn from it and try again. And I'll be here supporting you through every success and every failure." Victor cupped her face. "I don't need you to be perfect, Lena. I just need you to be you. Ambitious, brilliant, occasionally reckless you." Lena launched herself at him, kissing him with all the love and gratitude overflowing in her chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she whispered against his lips, "Thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for giving me room to become whoever I'm meant to be. Thank you for choosing me, for staying when you could have run, for loving me despite everything." That night, as they lay tangled together in bed, Lena traced the scars on Victor's chest and thought about how far they'd both come, from a forced contract to a chosen partnership, from captive and captor to equals building something meaningful together, from strangers bound by necessity to lovers bound by choice. "I have a confession," she said into the darkness. "What's that?" "Sometimes I'm glad my father made those terrible choices, because without them, I never would have met you, never would have discovered this strength in myself, never would have built this life." Victor's arms tightened around her. "I understand that. I feel guilty about it, but I understand it. The worst thing that happened to you led to the best thing that happened to me." "We're terrible people," Lena said with a smile. "We're complicated people. There's a difference. Marcus would say we're perfect for each other. Marcus is a romantic who cries at jewelry commercials. But he's also right." Victor kissed her forehead. "We are perfect for each other, not because we're undamaged or innocent or simple, but because we understand each other's darkness and choose to love each other anyway." 5 years after signing those divorce papers, Lena stood in the hospital holding their newborn daughter, while Victor paced beside the bed, equal parts terrified and awed. They'd named her Katerina, and she had Victor's dark hair and Lena's eyes. "She's perfect," Victor whispered, touching their daughter's tiny hand with reverent gentleness. "She's absolutely perfect." "She is," Lena agreed, watching this dangerous man transform into something soft and protective around their child. "And she's going to grow up knowing she's loved, knowing she's safe, knowing her parents chose each other and chose her deliberately. She'll never doubt any of that, I swear it." Marcus arrived within an hour, bearing flowers and tears. "Doctor." Morrison came next, bringing a gift from all the Katerina Project survivors, a handmade quilt with messages of hope stitched into every square. Victor's business managers sent cards and gifts. Even Agent Rodriguez sent a grudging congratulations. But the moment that mattered most came late that night, after all the visitors had left. Victor sat in the chair beside Lena's hospital bed, holding baby Katerina against his chest, singing softly in a language Lena didn't recognize. "What is that?" she asked quietly. "Russian lullaby. My mother used to sing it to Katerina when she was small." Victor's voice was thick with emotion. "I thought our Katerina should hear it too. A connection to the aunt she'll never meet but whose legacy she carries." Lena felt tears slide down her cheeks. This man who'd built an empire on violence was singing lullabies to their daughter with infinite tenderness. This man who'd started as her captor had become her greatest love and the father of her child. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much it sometimes hurts. I love you too, both of you, more than I have words for." Victor looked up from their daughter to meet Lena's eyes. "Thank you for staying, for choosing me, for giving me this, a family, a real family, built on choice instead of obligation. Thank you for showing me I was strong enough to survive your world, for protecting me until I could protect myself, for loving me enough to let me become who I needed to be. They sat together in the quiet hospital room, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them, and reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a contract signed in desperation to a marriage built on deliberate choice. From captivity to partnership. From darkness to light. The divorce papers had burned to ash years ago, but the marriage they'd built from those ashes was stronger than any contract could ever be. Because this marriage wasn't built on obligation or necessity or fear. It was built on truth, trust, and the daily choice to love each other despite their complications and because of their shared understanding. Lena Moreau had walked into a marriage contract expecting a prison. Instead, she'd found a partner who saw her worth and gave her power, who protected her fiercely and freed her completely, who loved her thoroughly and chose her deliberately. Victor Calderón had entered a marriage contract thinking he was saving someone. Instead, he'd found his salvation, a woman who accepted his darkness and guided him toward light, who stood beside him in violence and peace, who chose him not despite who he was, but because of everything they could become together. What had begun as a contract neither wanted had transformed into a partnership both treasured. The woman who'd tried to escape had claimed her place at the center of power. The man who'd caged her had set her free. And together, they'd built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. As dawn light crept through the hospital windows, Lena watched Victor rock their daughter and knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not just in staying, but in choosing him over and over again, in accepting the complexity of their love instead of running from it, in building a life that honored both the darkness they'd survived and the light they were creating. The contract was gone. The captivity was over. The threats were eliminated. All that remained was choice, love, and the future they would build together, one deliberate decision at a time.